Oh my. I just got here. Right away, I click live. I wasn't even ready. Well, you're never really ready. Welcome to the Condor DM show. Took a second there. I'm sorry. Welcome to the Condor DM show. Tonight is one of the many nights I'm covering old school D&D for a 2-week special focus. I'm putting on old school Dungeons and Dragons tonight. I'm covering the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, the Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes. 3 books that came out for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition. Not to change the game, but to give you extended tools to work with for whatever you're doing and ideas that have carried on throughout the many years of Dungeons and Dragons history. So, welcome. Welcome all. Welcome whoever shows up tonight. Welcome. It's how it is. Now, here's something that makes me a little somewhat sad, right? I always hope there's going to be social pressure on some old school Dungeons and Dragons content creators that can act very immature over the games, over gaming opinions. They can have a big hate on for me over gaming opinions. And I always hope logically they'll see that there's an error with that sooner or later. It may come around. But then I'll notice something. I've noticed something for many years now. A lot of old school Dungeons and Dragons video content creators on YouTube, especially on YouTube, obviously. I don't check out Rumble much, but here on YouTube, the guys are very short term in their thinking. And if they have a good night, like a good stream or something like that, in their minds, they get in this fantasy land of, okay, the future's set. We're way ahead. We don't need you. Screw you. All logic is out the window, and we'll act like immature children in our reaction to you. And I'm like, okay. You know, I get that that's the short term thinking. I know in the long term, that's not good. It's not good logically to be this way. And now all the social pressure to, behave in a more sociable way to get along with people, to sort of meet in the middle, is completely gone. And there's no guarantee they'll have content in a year. There's no guarantee they'll be doing interviews in a year, for example. And they'll, for a short time, they'll get some interviews, things will work out, right? They'll ride out a little tiny pinch of success, and all pressure to behave in a better way is completely gone. It's completely gone, right? They don't think long term. So where they're going to be in a year doesn't matter. They're never going to grow that much. And it's especially they're not going to grow that much because what they should do as far as being more peaceful, get along with people so they can grow bigger, that is out the door. And that really is what they got to do in the long run to get somewhere, to get a little further than, say, in an echo chamber. They have to be able to get along with people. It's one thing you'll notice as you're going up the ladder. You got to be able to get along with people. That's unnecessary. But they'll throw that at the door for a small, tiny bit of success that feeds their egos in the worst way. And then it's like, okay, where are you going to be in a year? Are you going to have all these interviews in a year? No. Oh my. I wish they'd see that, but they don't. So any chance of logical thinking that would benefit them in the long run is completely out the door. And I always hope that if I make a point against them or something like this, like, look, here you are behaving poorly, maybe you could be open to it and see that that's not good. Maybe if you were to act a little better, maybe at one point even I could talk to you. But no, that's not going to be a one good night. means all that type of social pressure is out the door, and they won't see it for a long time. I will. So in a year, the same people that are get a little feed onto their ego, in a year that will all calm down. That will all go away. They'll realize they're not going too far, and they'll have fucked up the community in the process because they don't mind putting a wedge between people because they think that they're going to get a hit. It's a soft, weak ego, and it's short-term thinking. Most content creators don't know what their content's going to be next week for old school D&D. They have no idea. They don't know what they're doing next week. They have no idea what they're doing next month. And if I ask them what they're going to be doing in a year, they have no idea. On occasion, on rare occasions, especially if one of them chooses to cover AD&D 1E, start to finish, they can have content in the short term for about 3 to 4 months. And then that will linger, because once you're out of the game, you got to either go to Beck Me or you're dead in the water. Interviews are limited. There's only so many people to talk to, and then you got to do that round again, right? Oh, it's a shame. It's a shame. I was hoping some guys might start seeing that, hey, even if they're a little outgoing towards other people outside of the circle or outside of the overall community, they would see that getting along with other people is better, right? Turning people in your own community into the attack content is not good. Taking shots at other content creators that are inside that old school community, me included. I'm not in a specific echo chamber, but I am old school. I'm in the old school community. There's no doubt. I don't see the benefit of turning me into content for your YouTube channel just so you can mouth off for a couple minutes and feed your really weak ego, right? Pathetic, weak ego, and curse. Oh, they'll brag about cursing up a storm. I'm like, yeah, like a 13-year-old boy. Okay, hey, that's what you're into, dude. I mean, I'm 46. I would never talk that way because I don't behave like a 13-year-old boy in streams. So there you go. And I would never go brag about it like, hey guys, guess what? I don't care. I act like a 13-year-old boy on streams. I would never do that. I would never go around bragging as if that is something to brag about. I would never say it like it's some proud feature of what I do on YouTube. Man, I act like a 13-year-old kid on streams, man, because I don't care. That's why I act like a 13-year-old kid. All I'm doing is I'm just describing the behavior and the age it would be appropriate to. So there you go. Anyway, I just noticed that. I noticed that recently. I noticed a couple guys had some people on their stream, and I thought for a minute, maybe they calmed down. I thought it'd be a good hit, and then I just realized they had a good night, and just a minor good night, and all that's gone now. Then I noticed another of the down with WotC gimmick and down with D&D. I don't get the old school why they keep kicking a dead horse that is dead. Like, you're not getting rid of Dungeons and Dragons. You're not getting rid of WotC. Hasbro backs WotC up. I don't get why we're there. Why we even make those arguments up. Like, it's just like a guy made a great post that I follow on X today. And he talks about all these different groups that said, we're here, like World of Darkness, we're going to end Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing. Pathfinder, we're going to end Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing. People forget, yeah, the OSR said that too. The OSR is going to end WotC and Dungeons and Dragons. Didn't do it. Now I see guys, old TSR staff members on there going, WotC's going, or D&D is going down with WotC. No, it's not. No, it's not. Here's going to be a hard pill for a lot of old school guys to swallow. Here's a hard pill to swallow. If you look at purchasing and all this, the old school tabletop role playing game community online of people makes up millions of people. The vast majority are in the WotC space and completely fine with WotC and are actually excited about the things that are happening that were announced at Gen Con. That's the vast majority. Think about it, millions of old school people online, especially D&D people. Millions. And when you look at the group of people that keeps yelling at WotC from the old school D&D circle, there's not even 1 million people there. So that just and then when you look at the audience for the new school, you realize it's not all just new school; it's a lot of old school guys. And where they definitely showed up is like games like a Shadow Dark, especially has attracted a bunch of them. So it might be a hard pill to swallow for a certain section of the old school D&D community that they are a minority when it comes to old school D&D people. And most old school D&D people are actually, they don't care about WotC's criticism of the past. Actually, quite a few of them, sad for us, agrees with a lot of the criticism of the past that came from WotC. I hate to say it, it's not about being political. It's not like I want to talk about that and then you aim focus, but let's be real. The majority of D&D people are not right wing. So just saying. I mean, look at the content creators, the video content creators especially. Old school D&D video content creators barely have an audience. When you think there's actively online millions of old school D&D people, yet our guys got like, I mean, some guys not in an echo chamber might have up to 40,000. That's out of millions. Then you get the guys that are in an echo chamber. Some of them top off at about 10 to 15,000. Out of millions of active people online. So sorry to say to people, but you're barely scratching the surface of the potential audience for D&D, old school D&D online. Like, and there's a reason those people do not scratch that audience. That they barely have an audience when you compare the numbers. They're just not a representation. So when I hear them in their fantasy way, like, we're gonna bring WotC down. I'm like, dude, WotC blocks you if they do hear what you say because they think you're stupid. And most old school D&D people aren't even paying attention to you. Hate to say it, I'm not a big YouTuber. You want to know what happens when I block people from the old school? I don't hear nothing about what they have to say about me. Nothing comes to me. No, they're what they say about me doesn't spread. Like I seen a guy commenting about me the other day saying there's another guy in X that talks about me all the time. I'm like, well, if I didn't check what was going on with him, I would have never even known this guy was still talking about me. I would say to myself, oh, he's still going on about me? I would have no idea. Like, I would have no idea because none of what people say about me on X gets back to me because it doesn't spread. They have no influence. Like, it doesn't get to me because I don't hear it. I don't hear about it because nobody talks about them or talks about what they say. And I talk to all kinds of people in the hobby, in the tabletop role-playing game hobby, that don't know about these people existing. They don't know what they say about me. I mean, the guys that talk about me have no influence at all. And if it wasn't for people in their own circle that I occasionally go see what they're saying, I wouldn't even know they were still talking about me. So it doesn't affect me on YouTube. It doesn't affect me nowhere. Period. Just I don't even know. That's why I don't get why people are the way they are, because they take a bit of people leaning into them as it goes to their heads. That's what I was talking about earlier when I said it'd be nice to see some of these guys open up the door, be a bit more reasonable, stop being so deceitful about me. I'd be willing to talk to them. But if they get the slightest bit of people watching them, like just say, because on YouTube this is nothing. If they have an audience, say on a stream, so the next day there might be a bit like 300 people that watch your stream that night. They might have got like 29, 30 likes, right? Well, if they have a stream and the next day you're seeing like 600 views and more like 40 likes, right away they're too big to talk to anyone. Like they react like it's like, oh, the success is pouring in. We're going somewhere now, baby. Okay. Sure. All right. And now they're too good for you. They're too good to be reasonable. Now all their bad behavior can stick where it is. They won't change. Nothing's going to adjust. Okay. All right. Sure. Even worse is the guys that will get like, I mean, when you think about this, is like a pinch of dust. I'll see guys put out a stream or a video and they get like 1,000+ views. Oh my, there you go. Too big, way too big for you. They're better. You're a nothing. You're an ant. I'm like, okay, sure. I mean, there's guys. Then if you go to another part of YouTube, you get 3,000 views, and that's considered nothing. But in the old school world, where you can barely get much because there's not a big audience here in a certain echo chamber, them getting 1,000, man, that they're too big for you now. Now they're too good. Whatever. I don't know what to say to people. Hey, if you really don't want to think of it the long game and get ahead, that's fine. Right? And conversations get boring, especially when you can't bring new people in. Or if you're in your own communities, like I'm a guy in the old school. So it's like, I don't get why people turn me into content when, like in the attack form, when it'd be better to have me on your stream. It'd be better to make peace with me and talk to me. Or I don't get why guys pretend that I don't know anything. All you got to do is listen to me talk and you'll know I know my shit. So it's like, and I know a lot more than a lot of guys you're having on these panels and on these streams. And I'm way more confident as a speaker, talker, stuff like that. So it's like, whatever, that's how it is. But say in about an hour, I'm going to start the coverage of the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, the Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes. It's going to be a good stream. I don't know if you've ever checked out any of these books. I know some AD&D 1E people that surprisingly have not really looked at this stuff. And I was like, really? And here's another topic I want to bring up. You know, a few years ago, I brought out a video talking about how dungeons are underground. Now I'm talking about D&D. And so there was a bunch of people arguing with me. Dungeons can be a forest. Dungeons can be a tower. Dungeons can be this. Dungeons can be that. And my argument back to them was this. In D&D, dungeons are underground. And they said, I'm full of shit. I'm full of shit. Dungeons are a tower. Dungeons are the forest. Dungeons can be anywhere. And I said, well, that's not how D&D sees dungeons. But I'm someone who's really from the real history of D&D. I've been here since the old school. There's fakes out there, fakes around the old school of Dungeons and Dragons that like to argue with me that know next to nothing about our fucking hobby. So let me straighten it out for you fucking nimrods out there that tell me dungeons are a forest, dungeons are a tower. The Dungeoneer Survival Guide, guess what it focuses on? Making life underground. Creating a whole underground world. Why does it talk that way about dungeons? and the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. Because in the D&D and D&D gaming, dungeons are considered to be underground. You're going down, below. You go down so many levels down. They talk about down all the time. Not in a tower, not in the forest. In the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, it talks about creating an underground world. Not the, oh, we're making a world in the forest because that's a dungeon too somehow. Or we're making a world in an above ground tower that's a dungeon too. No, dungeons in the D&D world, in old school D&D, are viewed as a thing underground. That's how they're presented. That's how they're talked about. And you would know that if you were actually around during the actual old school era and you actually talked to real old school guys. The reason I instinctively talked about dungeons being underground in D&D is because I come from the real old school era. I talked to people that were really there, that really have the Dungeons and Dragons view of dungeons. I wasn't talking about philosophy or how you could view dungeons outside of D&D. I was talking about how dungeons are viewed in Dungeons and Dragons. Underground. All underground. When you get the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, there is no mistake in this. They don't talk about the dungeon being out in the forest. They don't talk about the above ground place being a dungeon. They talk about an underground world and creating one, because dungeons in D&D are viewed as something underground. Under. Fakes that came into the old school of Dungeons and Dragons late are people that were secluded at home and don't know shit about old school D&D other than their little fucking secluded, isolated fucking little home group. Yeah, okay, fair enough. They know next to nothing about D&D. They act like they do, right? That's why when I say things like sandbox, if you're really here since OD&D, if you really know the old school as well as you, if you claim you're old school, if I say sandbox, as sandbox was with OD&D and Beckme, and you say I'm wrong, you're a fake, right? So if I describe what a real sandbox was and you just give me the module definition, you're a fake, okay? If I talk about dungeons in D&D and you tell me somehow the forest is a dungeon or the tower is a dungeon, you're a fake. You're a fake. That's what I call you. I'm sorry to be so harsh, but see, I'm from the actual old school era, the real D&D world. And I talk about things as they were talked about by people in the actual fucking hobby, in the community, the open gaming groups. I talk about how they talked about stuff. We never talked about dungeons being in an above ground tower or in a forest. We talked about them being underground because that's how D&D viewed dungeons. Now, outside of the Dungeons and Dragons world, if you told me dungeons can be this, I'll be like, well, I even said at the time, fair enough how people outside of D&D might view it, but in D&D it's this. And they were like, no, you're wrong. I was like, no, you're a fucking fake. You're a fake. Either you're fucking isolated at home with your fucking little isolated fucking group and you know next to nothing about old school D&D, or you came into the hobby late, or you're one of these guys that played a few games and you took a break off for like 20 years and came back. That's not me. I'm from the actual era, from actual old school. I am old school D&D. I'm from that real fucking group of people. And so when I talk about these things, I talk about how they talked about them. And the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, it doesn't talk about a forest being a dungeon or above ground tower. It talks about creating an underground world, an underground living situation. Why? Because dungeons are considered down. Oh, man. Or again, the sandbox thing. I get so annoyed with that. I old school guys would do this. If I describe a sandbox that was from OD&D and Beckme and Traveler, say a non-D&D game, the way they view sandbox, I would never have a real old school guy call me incorrect or say I'm wrong. They'd be like, yeah, that's right. That's correct. I know. But if you're fake and you know nothing about old school and you only know some isolated bits and pieces like the fucking modules and the redefined definition of sandbox, of course you're going to give me some fake thing. Another thing I would ask people to do is I'm here having nuanced conversations and talks about tabletop role-playing games. I hate to say it to people. I don't mean to be so crude, but this is my honest reaction to some comments I get. I'm talking in nuanced ways, very deep ways about tabletop role-playing games. If you're a simple-minded thinker, my advice would be avoid nuanced dialogue about the games and don't make up shit. Don't make up shit, especially that thing you're making up. It benefits what you're saying, but it's made up. It's not even real. It's just instead of you saying what you heard, you're saying what you heard made you feel. So if I tell you about sandbox, and your reaction to say, well, you're not really running the game at all or something unless you sandbox. I never said that, but that's how my words, it made you feel. It made you feel like that's what I'm saying. Right? But I'm here to have logical, intelligent conversations. And I don't care how my words made you feel. I want you to logically take in what I'm saying. Right? I am very specific. So if I don't say that, I'm really not communicating that. Here's what I say about sandboxing. I say, when my argument is for all the people out there that say the DM or the game master is a player at the table, I say the only way a DM is going to be something close to a player at the table is when they do sandbox and they're constantly improvising throughout a session in the same way a player would be playing the game. So that's the only way a DM can really participate in the game that way. I never say if you're doing a railroad or doing something else, that means you're not DMing. What I do say is if you go raw and buy a module, well then I don't call that you being a real DM. You might call it DMing, but I'd say a player or a cockroach could do that. So it's very specific what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that you're not DMing or not game mastering if you're doing something other than the sandbox. And when you react to me, I would hope that you're not going to tell me how my words made you feel. I want you to react to what I actually said. So, and if my words, if what they made you feel benefits an argument against me, well, I didn't even say that. I don't care about your fucking feelings. I'm saying what I say to be exact. So if I didn't say that and it's just how you feel, well, then you're making shit up. Because nobody said that. That benefits your argument, but nobody said that. Oh, man. I don't care about feelings. I'm talking to nerds. So I'm very specific when I speak on purpose. Right? And I want people to logically deal with what I'm saying, not how my words make them feel. I don't give a fuck about your feelings at all. Fuck your feelings. Look, I don't hate you, but just screw your feelings. Oh, they are. They are, Miles. They're fucking awesome. So is the manual of planes, which is a little bit more complicated, but definitely there. Some guys asked me today, do they change the game? And I'm like, no, they just add to it. Like, recently I covered some stuff that changes somewhat how the game works, or the classes you could play and specialization. This just adds to it. But the Dungeoneer survival guide does one thing that's very clear. I was just had a little bit of a rant about this earlier, just actually a few minutes ago, Miles. So about a couple of years ago, I put out a video saying in Dungeons and Dragons, dungeons are viewed as an underground source. They're considered underground. Mm-hmm. And people made videos laughing, say, "Oh, you're fucking wrong. No, dungeons could be a forest, could be a dungeon, a tower could be a dungeon." And I said, you know, I get outside of D&D, maybe you could argue that that's the case. You could make an argument, I guess. I don't know. I really don't have too much of an opinion on it. So I acknowledge that right away. But I said in D&D, dungeons, for the sake of the game, are viewed as an underground source. And they're like, no, it isn't. You're full of shit. And I'm like, no, if you're actually in the old school, you would know what I'm talking about. Go to Dungeoneer Survival Guide. You read it, Miles. What do they talk about? Creating an underground world through the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. It's all about underground life and underground and because how is dungeons viewed in D&D? As a source going downward. I would try using those for 5th edition games. I appreciate you, Miles, because you're a new school guy that appreciates some old school stuff. I can always tell. It's a shame that you play with some people that don't adjust to some of the things that you pitch out there. It's a shame, but it is what it is, right? It is what it is. Yeah. I talked about the Quantum Ogre the other day. I think you heard that. Some very simple-minded guys were really mad at me about the Quantum Ogre thing. Like, it doesn't hurt the railroad. It doesn't, like, dude. And the reaction was, like, of course, what I was just getting mad about before you said anything was, I had a guy do like a page response, but it wasn't like some intelligent response. It was a page response, and in it, he's saying things that I never said, but what I understand is what I said made him feel like I meant something. So, and what he's doing is reacting to me as if I said the thing that, like, say I say something that I don't directly say. So I don't say you're not doing this or you're not this. I don't actually say that. I might be telling you my opinion about something, about the way people run the game. And you feel like I'm saying that if you do it this other way, that means you're not running the game. Now, I don't say it, but you feel that that's how you feel from my words. Now, I'm not trying to make you feel a certain way, and I'm talking to nerds. So in reality, I don't care how you feel. My words are what I mean. There's no between the lines with me. So if I don't say what you're feeling, then I actually don't think that. So I don't care about your feelings. But I'll get guys that will react to me, and they'll act like the way my words made them feel is I actually said this. Like they might point out, well, guys are saying you're not really DMing unless you're doing sandbox. I've never said that, but I understand the guy replying to me takes it as if I have. He's gone from understanding that's how he feels about what I said, but that's not what I said. Now, when he says it as if I did say that, which I didn't, and I don't even believe that, but he says it that way, it's to benefit another argument he's making. Now, if you take that statement away, his argument gets weaker right away. So he's saying this, and he's saying it in a very simple way. He's talking about railroading being okay, and it's okay to trick your players. They don't know better. Let's just have fun. And what did I say? If you understand what I said about Quantum Ogre, I don't care what people do at their table. Right? I'm not saying people can't go do this stuff at their table. So to actually come at me as if I'm saying something, as if people do something at their table and I'm going to stop. No. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with having a standard that is up here. Oh, of course, you can, all these things are true. You can trick your players. You can be lazy. You don't have to make the effort. Right? You can do all that, and you can do that at your table. And I support that. And I make it very clear verbally. Right? Verbally. I'm really on point with that. What I say is, when it comes to the use of the community and us talking about things, how does that benefit what we're doing in the hobby? Well, we have standards here. If we don't say anything, standards are set anyway. But if we do, standards go up to here. I'm like, well, in the community, if players play badly or do something that's lazy, they get criticized, right? So if you came here into the open dialogue, into the open square, and you said, you pretty much describe yourself as a lazy, good for nothing player, people will oat you. Not high standard games, just high standards. So we don't mind at all calling out lazy players, right? So if I notice a practice that is lazy, say, because the game tells you, all games tell you about improvising. And because the games expect you to improvise, and I mean all games, most either tell you to improvise straight out, or they'll give you tools to help you with random and shit like this. No game promotes tricking players with the quantum ogre, for example. No game. So it's pretty much all games are expecting you to either improvise purely on your own through understand the game, or improvise with their help, right? It's an expectation. It's a standard. So what I call the quantum ogre gimmick lazy. And I'm like, it's no different than telling players or calling out players for being lazy at the table playing the game. If they come to the community and they say anything hint about being lazy, everyone here makes fun of them, ridicules, goes on. We set a high standard for players to not be lazy. There's nothing wrong with the community setting up a social pressure standard for game masters, to not be lazy. Now, what you do at your table is your business. I don't follow players. We might criticize players, but we don't follow them back to their table. I don't say the player has to sit up. I'm not at his table telling him how to do anything. I don't go to a game master's table and tell them how to play or run the game, ever. I don't believe in it. But if you want to come here and tell us, hey, man, I'm lazy, I'm good for nothing, and you say it proudly, well, if you were a player saying that, you'd be called, you get ridiculed, you get criticized. So I'm like, there's nothing wrong with the community using social pressure to criticize game masters for being lazy, right? Again, what they do at their table is their business. But it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong. It's called social pressure. If you go to any other hobby, video games or anything, and if you are half-assing or cheating or doing anything that's considered negative, everybody calls you out, right? Nobody's going to go follow you back to your computer and tell you how to play the game. But if you go out, it's called social pressure. It's a healthy thing. And who benefits, right? Everybody benefits from, if you socially pressure players to be embarrassed about being lazy, and that means that guy goes back to his table with his group and he sits up, he pays attention. Well, first off, you improve the experience for the other people gaming with him, right? And these games, when you actually make an effort, you improve the experience for yourself. So it will be better. For a game master to be able to improvise, that is a technique and a tool you need. And you actually need to be able to do, and you can do. And when you can do it and do it confidently, you have more fun. There's more options. You perform better, but you have a better experience. It's a great thing about making an effort with the tabletop role-playing game. You're never just kissing the ass of the other people at the table. Your own experience will be benefited by the effort, right? So we do social pressure on players. There's nothing wrong with doing social pressure on game masters too, right? It doesn't mean we follow them back to their table and tell them how to play these games. So we got to be able to separate that and not deceive, because that's what people do when they don't want when they don't want healthy social pressure. What's one of the first things a lot of two-faced people will do? They'll say, "Stop telling me what to do at the table." You know you're not doing that. You know they're only painting your social pressure that way to make what you're doing that's good seem bad. And that is to prevent you from putting good, healthy social pressure on them. In any other hobby or walk of life, social pressure to improve what you're doing is considered a good thing. And if basically what I tell people, what you do at your table is fine. But if you're embarrassed about it, to come out to the public and tell people what you're doing, maybe that social pressure of the embarrassment of telling people what you're doing will will be what makes you want to do something better. And that's what social pressure does. It doesn't control what you do at the table. So what you do privately with you and your group, that's your business, right? But if you're embarrassed to come out and tell the rest of us what you're doing, well, that's good. That's what social pressure is doing to you. It's making you embarrassed to tell us. It doesn't mean we're going to your table and stopping you from doing it. But if you're embarrassed to come tell us what you're doing, that social pressure, well, first off, it's working. It is saying that we call it bad behavior is considered the standard set. Bad behavior is considered bad behavior. That's good, right? And for those that want to be able to say in public what they're doing without being embarrassed, that means they have to go back to their table and run the game better, be a better player. And again, who does that benefit in the hobby? If you go back and you focus as a player, you benefit the other players you're playing the game with. You benefit the game master. Not only that, your own experience is benefited by you sitting up and paying attention. So you have a better time. Game masters, same deal. If they go and make a better effort, not being mentally lazy, it benefits their players' experience with them, and it will benefit their own experience at the table. It will improve the game for them, not just their players. So that social pressure is a healthy thing. Again, it doesn't mean we follow them back to their table and tell them what to do. What they do privately at their table is their business. End of story. It just, people have, in our hobby, especially in the old school, people have gone years getting away with taking good statements, good approaches, good social pressure, and constantly painting it as something that it's not, to prevent something good. Like debating. We've been in the old school for 50 years. There's issues we should have debated decades ago. Had healthy debates. We should be advanced in the debates on these issues to the point of having structured, healthy conversations about certain topics at this point. But it's been 50 years, and there's things we have no healthy conversation at all about. Because what do they do for the last 50 years all the time? Well, debates, healthy debates, are called drama. If you disagree with somebody's idea, it's called an attack. Why did they call healthy debates drama? It's because calling it drama makes it a bad thing. But it's a good thing. But it's a false way of painting a good thing. Disagreeing with somebody else's idea in the square, the open square of ideas. Disagreeing with ideas is what we do. You bring your ideas here, and if you mention them out in public, they might be challenged. Not in a negative sense, in a good sense. But what do people do in the old school? They call people that challenge other people's ideas people that are attacking them. Suddenly, and you don't have to say nothing about the person. You can simply just make a video responding to their idea. You know, you'll be told by a bunch of guys in the old school, oh man, you're attacking that guy. And you go back and listen to the guy's video, and you'll just listen. Everything he says is disagreeing with the idea. At no point does the guy actually verbally insult or go after the individual pitching the idea. Like, he doesn't go after him personally. Yet you go around and you'll notice all kinds of guys are identifying that disagreement, not as a disagreement, but as an attack. So they can shut down the person disagreeing with the idea. So they can shut down the activity of disagreement. And I call that coming out in public and trying to live in a protective bubble. Like, why you're out in public. You're out in public, stating your ideas out in public, and you do not want to be challenged, right? You're not late, I'm just early. I'm always early, Black Rose. Always early. But I'm going to shut down a debate that I had a few years ago tonight, because I'm covering the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, the Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual Planes. A few years ago, I said something I knew to be true from the viewpoint of old school D&D. It doesn't mean outside of old school D&D, people might have different views on what a dungeon is. But I said a few years ago, I made a video saying dungeons in D&D are underground. Underground. And people said, "Oh, you're full of shit and wrong." Sorry. Said I'm full of shit and wrong. It's the same thing with the sandbox. Because most guys don't know about how OD&D and BECME did sandbox gaming. They think my description of sandbox is wrong because all they know is the redefined version of sandbox from the modules, right? They don't know how OD&D and BECME did sandboxing. They only know about the redefined version that you see early in the 70s too. I mean, there's a hint of this redefining of it, but Traveller really reestablishes what a sandbox is. But OD&D is already doing it, and BECME continues to do the old school of sandboxing, even though they're going to try to redefine it early because it is going to affect the modules, because they're going to realize early the modules can sell, right? So they're going to try to redefine it. But before this, if you actually know the history of real Dungeons and Dragons, you know my description of sandbox is correct. Is a correct one. It's one of two. If you count the original way of viewing it and then a redefined version of it. So a few years ago, I said D&D views dungeons as underground. I was told I was full of shit, and I said I even came out responding saying maybe outside of D&D they do view what you might want to consider a dungeon in different ways, but in the D&D world, dungeons are considered underground, down below. Now, this is what I said. Now, I knew this because in the old school, when I came into it, everybody talked about dungeons as underground. And it's because that's how D&D treated them. That's how D&D viewed them. So I was like, I was just wondering because I read the Dungeon Survival Guide, that Dungeoneer Survival Guide. I knew all this. I knew this, and these guys were telling me I was full of shit. And I was like, I even come out saying, "Well, who's ever responded to me is fake old school. They're fake." And people were like, "Oh yeah, he calls everyone fake." I'm like, no, I'm calling them fake because if you're really old school, you would not be disagreeing with me. The Dungeoneer Survival Guide. What is it helping you do with dungeons? Creating an underground world, creating a living environment underground. It's even described that way because in the D&D game, dungeons are treated as something down. You go down so many floors. It's all down below the surface, right? And they don't treat it like I was getting told. Well, a forest could be a dungeon. I was like, yeah, not in D&D. An above ground tower could be a dungeon. Yeah, not if you're really old school Dungeons and Dragons. You wouldn't say that. That's not how D&D views it. I said it doesn't mean that you're wrong in the sense that I guess you could make that argument outside. I guess if you really cared about it that much, the issue outside of the D&D world, sure, but that's not how we're going to view it in the D&D world. We're going to view it as underground. Like the entrance to the Tomb of Horrors. It's like, come on, guys. I'm not trying to be an ass, but you ever had people that aren't really old school D&D people? Like, I'm really old school, so I'm like the real deal. And so when I show up, I say things I actually don't. I'm not saying it to actually start an argument. Like, I wasn't saying what I said about dungeons to piss anyone off. I was saying it because I'm really old school, and this is really old school D&D. That's how we viewed it. And then to hear guys that I knew were either isolated at home with a small group that knew nothing about the hobby, or they played a few games, quit for like fucking 20 years and came back. And they're going to tell me, a guy who was actively in the old school, in the open old school forever, they're going to tell me that that's not how it is. I'm like, come on, guys. Even the guys that don't like me. I remember some funny things. I had old school guys that are online, real old school guys that privately came to me and said, well, man, you have a bad reputation. So they admitted to me they did not want to be seen agreeing with me in public. It's how bad it's how many people lie about me. But I had some real old school guys that were privately coming to me and say, yeah, you're right about dungeons. I'm like, yeah, I know. Same thing with the sandbox thing. I had a few guys that added me to Discord and DM me, said, yeah, you're right. That's how we did sandboxing in OD&D and BECME. I'm like, yeah, I know, because I'm the real deal. I know. because I'm the thing these guys are pretending to be. It's again, it's like the guys who are supposedly old school D&D guys that say you can't do combat without miniatures. I'm like, right away, they just gave me on. So like, you're not even old school D&D. I'm old school because I understand we never used miniatures on a regular up until the mid 90s, going into the late 90s when WotC finally puts them out in plastic. And even the early 90s, they're experimenting with, and that becomes a little bit more regular as the experimenting spreads and the amateurs that spread out their ideas a bit more. So more people are trying their stuff. But even that's minimal. It's not until WotC really comes out itself as mainstream with plastic do you see more people taking up miniatures. From 1974 right up until the 90s, the vast majority of DMs, not 51%, more like fucking 70 to 80%, more like 80% to be real, if not even more than that, did pure theater of the mind combat all the time only. So it's like, when I was told that, oh yeah, you can't do combat without miniatures, I was like, and then they would hear me go, that I'd say, well, that guy is a fake old school D&D guy. They were like, Steven or Condor, why are you calling him fake? I'm like, well, if you're really from the old school, you would know what I know. You wouldn't say I'm full of shit, and you would never say you have to have miniatures to do combat. No old school D&D person would ever say that. Would ever even think to say that. You wouldn't even remotely fucking assume that to be true, not if you're the real thing. That just means you fucking were either isolated like a, you know, like to the extreme, or you're someone that played a bit, took a fucking 20-year period off, came back, and you're pretending to be something you are not. But I'm the real deal. I hate to go on to people about this, but I'm really from the old school era. And some guys might tell me I started in the 70s. I'll be like, well, if you were around, fine enough. But you know how many guys started in the 70s, took fucking 25 years off, came back? I'm like, yeah, you fucking barely know shit. Piss off. Or if you're isolated with a group at home, like, of course. That's why they don't get it. I remember talking to some isolated guys like, well, you do know that it's like only like less than 10% of people were at home with their at-home groups. You do know that over like 90% of players that came into the hobby were antisocial nerds with no friends, no family to game with, and public DMs. If it wasn't for guys like me and many others, you wouldn't even have a fucking hobby to speak about, and TSR wouldn't have a company. That's why they leaned into the tournament play. And that's why tournament play did work for a while, because there was enough public people to actually take care of the numbers for a while. Right? There was enough public people to take care of the hobby. Today, you see it more with the internet world, and you saw the early 2000s, what happened? Again, the internet hobby gets held up by who? The guys with their friends, or guys like me who get on the internet part of the world after doing it in person for so long, and I'm taking on strangers. You find out 99% of game masters that came online right away were all the public guys. And we came on in vast numbers because there was tons of us. And we lift up this hobby. You go to Roll20, it's the same thing. 99% of game masters are all fucking public people that need to run games for strangers. I mean, the vast majority. Because still to this day, most people that enter the hobby are antisocial nerds with no friends and no family. And very few people in our hobby have a built-in at-home group with friends and family. Very, very, very few. And I'm not hating on them, right? But that's just true. And to me, it's if you're isolated at home, I could understand why sometimes you might disagree with me. But I can also understand that if we get a bunch of YouTubers that are at the at-home group guys, that's why I'm like, there's millions of old school D&D people online, but yet you see some of the YouTubers and you find out these are the guys were at home, with friends and family. I'm like, no wonder you're not connecting with even 2% of the online audience for the old school. It's because they don't relate with what you're talking about. And the worst thing is, I get pigeonholed in with these guys. So it's only when old school D&D guys actually finally come by my stuff do they realize, oh shit, he really knows the thing. He really is talking our language. I'm like, Yeah, I know. I know you assume most guys over here don't know shit about the hobby because they do. I talk to old school guys all the time when I finally run into them. They're like, man, I thought you were just like one of them. Like, we ignore these guys over here. I'm like, yeah, I know. They're like, but Steven or Condor, you're real. Like, you really know the shit. I'm like, yeah, I know. I really know the shit. I'm not like those guys. They're like, those guys are like at home with their at home groups. Like, it's real old school guys got so used to these guys being at the top, they just ignore them. And that's why there's almost no audience around. And then even worse, I get pigeonholed in with these fuckers. I don't hate them, Black Rose, but I hate getting pigeonholed in with them. Because then I'm assumed to be one of these not knowing shit guys until somebody comes around real from the old school and they're like, holy shit, you're the real deal. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm the real deal, baby. I'm the real deal. All right. I'll be right back. I got to get a drink. 1 sec. Black Rose, the Bat Blue. As if. Trust me, if I'm going to drink, it's going to be an event. Like if I'm drinking liquor, I don't casually do it. So this could be the last smoke I have, and I'm going to jump into the coverage. Well, last smoke before the coverage. But it is nice, but it does take a while. It annoys me to have to find out that there are so many old school guys, but a lot of them do like avoid YouTubers because they assume they'll say YouTubers don't really game. That's why they think these guys don't know much about the hobby. I'm serious. Like, go talk to guys that are really old school, real old school D&D guys. They avoid YouTubers that are old school, and they'll say things like, these guys don't really play the game. They just talk. And the reason they think that is because when they hear these guys speak, they hear nothing that relates to their actual experience in the hobby. They're like even the miniature stuff. I know this. I talk to guys. They're like, yeah, they talk like we've all used the fucking miniatures. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like, but they're like, you actually, you know. I'm like, yeah, dude, I know. Like, I know. But it's, these guys just assume. So it's nice to run the guys like Bill, right? Because Bill's a real old school guy. So you notice Bill will be here and I'll be saying stuff and he's like, yep. No, because I'm not making shit up. That's why Bill never finds something to disagree with me about. Right? Because I'm just saying that stuff that he understands because he's really old school. Like he's really from that era. Right? And whenever I run to guys that are really from that era, they get what I'm saying. They totally do because they're like, yeah, we were there. Like we actually know. And the reason they'll listen to other YouTubers that claim to be old school D&D guys is because they don't know. They're just full of shit. I know that you know that I know that you know. Baby, 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 baby. I know it all, baby. And yes, I'll fucking, it's not egotistic. Think about what I'm saying, Black Rose. I'm not saying it like it's not like, oh, I'm great because I know. It's just that I'm saying is you would think most people that say they're old school, if you're really a person from that era and you come around, you would assume you're going to hear things that you truly relate with. Like things you know you did during the old school era, right? And I'm just saying, guys are so used to being from that era, they listen to a YouTuber talk about it and they realize the YouTuber has no fucking clue what he's talking about. Like, I know a lot of guys that like miniatures, but they're real old school guys. And even they, because they'll laugh when they hear a panel where they hear some supposed old school D&D guy saying you can't do combat without miniatures. And they're like, well, I love miniatures, but most of my gaming was without miniatures. Like, they know right away that that's full of shit, right? Yeah. It's not an ego boost. It's just, it's one of these things that I want to clarify for the people out there that are the real thing and want to hear a little bit more of what they relate with and be able to talk to somebody who knows the shit they went through, right? And I don't get why I have to have these clashes with people. It annoys me. All I'm doing is telling, because I understand this, Black Rose. Guys have agendas. This is what I mean when I say they have agendas, because all I'm doing is telling the truth. But the truth counters their agendas. Hold on. That's just me getting after someone. Like, stop saying my fucking name. I'm doing a stream in the middle, ready to do a certain important part. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of get it, but it bothers me when all I do is speak the truth and then I end up in drama. Like, people, I say the things I say about miniatures, and all I'm doing is telling people the truth, and people get mad at me. But I realize why. Because they have an agenda. And here's what happens, Black Rose. Before someone like me speaks up, there'll be several guys that set a standard, right? They try to. Doesn't mean they do it successfully, right? They try to, though. No, but they'll have an agenda. And what they do is they'll be like, say several YouTubers in their audience have set this false agenda about miniatures, right? And I wouldn't even know it. This is why, like 7 years ago, when I first had my first big trouble with them, I had no idea I was going to have trouble with them. So I did a 3-minute video. I told everyone, you've heard me say this before, and it was me explaining the history of miniatures and talking about old school D&D and saying how I prefer pure theater of the mind. Well, then I started getting threats, people threatening me and everything, and people freaking out. What I did not know was there were some guys that really liked miniatures that had an agenda that already set a standard before I showed up. They already pushed this deceit, lied about you being able to do pure theater of the mind. They lied. And they all set this up, and they had everybody sort of nodding their head, like, yep. The thing is, I don't know that when I get to make this video. So when I made the video, it blows up on me, but I don't know. I was so confused at first. It took me a while to actually learn this, like actually figure out why so many people started attacking me over this. And then the attacks never stopped. Because when I finally realized it, I start saying other truth about the real old school era, like real things. It's like 2 years ago when I mentioned the dungeon thing. I said D&D views dungeons as an underground gimmick. That's what dungeons are in D&D, underground. People had already decided they were calling other things dungeons. I was like, well, that's not how old school D&D views it, though. So I'm just telling the truth. And I'm not, and I'm always reasonable. I say maybe outside of D&D, you could classify something else as a dungeon. Maybe that's the case, but in D&D, that's not how we bother to view it. That's not how they're pitched. People were fuming. It's, again, my sandbox video was not, if you go back and listen to the first sandbox video, and I know you've already watched it, I say nothing aggressive in the video. I talk about the way I like to do sandboxing. And and I even said, I just do it the old school way. So I'm going to just explain to you how you properly do a sandbox, the way I do a sandbox. There's nothing offensive in that video. Just me talking about how I like to run it like an old sandbox, right? So I explained what you would have done in OD&D and Beckmeat, and with my own style to it. But I'm just explaining what you would do. What happened with that video? I had a bunch of people on X blowing the fuck up about me being wrong about sandboxing. I had people on stream say I was full of shit about the sandbox. I had people making videos where in the videos they're making comments about how I'm wrong about the sandbox. Yet I'm not wrong at all. I'm not just slightly right. I'm fucking on point, perfectly correct. Like with every word, spot on. Nothing I said is out of line. But I don't realize that they have really fallen into the redefined version of sandboxing from modules. I don't realize that they've all been tricked by TSR. I don't realize that the brainwashing that TSR did, which it was that to actually make sure their sales weren't going to drop. It was propaganda. It was a lie. It was redefining the thing. I didn't know how effective that was. Like I just didn't know. And I didn't know that they never knew about this old way. But instead of just saying, that's not, talking to me. Like, why do you call that sandboxing? This is what we call it. Like, instead of reasonably talking to me, they freaked the fuck out. They freaked out about my dungeon thing. They freaked out about my pure theater of the mind thing. It's because I don't realize that these guys, once they set something down as what they believe, there's no open-mindedness to change, to adjust, because they put their egos on it too. Like, they can't be wrong. There'll be agendas, like the miniature thing. They want to set an agenda. But there's this other push that they do is they have their egos, their entire identity built off their opinions. And for them to be wrong is to say, in their minds, is to say they're no good. Or they must be stupid. Or if they're wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? Right? And I'm quite the opposite. The reason I have some very nice, friendly people with me that are very nice people is because I've been corrected. I've got on here where I've been wrong and willing to bend. I fail at stuff and I openly admit my failures, like failing to sell the game on the first round. Why I always go on about Samwise 7 Tim. It's because I can remember it sticks out to me really strongly, but it's a debate I lost. I failed at things. I don't put my identity on I need to be right about everything. I don't think I'm a perfect human being. What I don't realize is the guys that when I say something that doesn't line up with what they believe, their entire identity and ego is on them being right about everything. And if they're wrong, they're screwed. Oh, it is going well. Actually, you're just in time, Bill. Done this, and I'm covering Dungeoneer Survival Guide, Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes, baby. Good stuff. I know you'll know a bunch about this, Bill. You'll really appreciate it. I know you'll like this stream. This one's going to be good. And if people have not read this stuff, oh my. This stuff set a standard going forward. Like extreme standards are all set by these books. And I didn't want to do them separate because there's only so much to say about each, but I mean, there's a lot to say about each. I have a lot to say about each, but I couldn't see, if I could bring other people on the stream, maybe I could have done a stream about the wilderness, a stream about the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, a stream about the Manual Planes, but just me here doing it the way I do it. It's better to do all three books in one go. A lot of material on it, but it's better to do all three in one go. In one go, baby. In one go. Anyway, I can finally teach people about the way D&D old school actually views dungeons as underground living environments. Or at least the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, if it wasn't clear to you, wanted to clarify this in advance, that type of view, right? But anyway. In time. In time. All right. Here we go, baby. It's time to start. Oh yeah. Oh, so many beautiful. I love these books personally, Bill. Miles, who's watching, also read them. Black Rose, I know as a second edition guy. Maybe he doesn't know much about these. Some of this stuff is definitely carried on. So, as Bill, you would know, some of the stuff comes back later, but the weather stuff is fucking beautiful. I'm going to, when I'm doing I'm doing influences in birth. I'm going to do each for each different book. So here's a bit of fluff, as we always do, starting with the fluff, baby. Fluff time. Dungeoneer Survival Guide, 1986. Influence in birth of that book. By the mid-1980s, AD&D had matured. Most groups understood how to run a dungeon, but many dungeons still follow familiar patterns. Rectangular rooms, straight corridors, isolated cave systems, wandering monsters, treasure, isolated cave systems. Yeah. At the same time, designers across the hobby were creating increasingly complex and believable underground environments. Dungeons were becoming less like game boards and more like living places with natural formations, multiple routes, and interconnected ecosystems. TSR wanted to push the evolution even further. The result was Dungeoneer Survival Guide, written by Douglas Niles, one of TSR's rising designers. Instead of asking, how do I stock another dungeon? The book asks, how does an underground world actually work? Underground. Real world cave exploration. Real world cave exploration. One of the book's biggest influences was spellology, the study of explorations. I'm not exactly sure how to say that. The study of explorations of caves. During the 1970s and early 1980s, recreational caving had grown in popularity, and the book drew heavily from real underground environments. It explored subjects such as limestone caverns, lava tubes, underground rivers, sinkholes, unstable ceilings, cave weather, underground ecology. Rather than treating caves as empty spaces waiting for monsters, it encouraged DMs to think about how those environments naturally formed and functioned. The simulation trend. The late 1970s and early 1980s saw many board games, war games, and role-playing games become increasingly interested in simulation. Players were expected to think about practical challenges like food, light, equipment, climbing, fatigue, environmental hazards. The dungeon itself became an obstacle to overcome, not just monsters living inside of it. A complete underground campaign. Perhaps the book's biggest innovation was suggesting an entire campaign could take place below the surface. Instead of simply entering a dungeon for treasure, players could explore an underground world containing civilizations, trade routes, politics, exploration, forgotten kingdoms. The underground became a setting in its own right. Expanding AD&D's rules. The book also introduced and greatly expanded rules for climbing, rope work, vertical movement, cave generation, underground travel, environmental dangers. Many of these rules would continue to influence AD&D play long after the book itself. These books never changed initially what the game was. They only add to it. So when I say about rules, understand there's no changing of the core rules, only something you add on to the game, not change. Not like Unearthed Arcana. Unearthed Arcana actually try to change some of the core rules. These books don't actually do that. They just add on to them. Expanding the Underdark. The guide also helped flesh out AD&D's underground civilizations. It introduced the Darrow to AD&D and expanded material on people such as the Drow, the Duger, the Swerve and Nephilim, helping transform Underdark into a believable world rather than simply a collection of monsters. Wilderness Survival Guide, also from 1986. Released only months after Dungeoneer Survival Guide, this companion volume explored the opposite frontier. If one book asked, how do characters survive beneath the earth? This one asked, how do they survive above it? Again, written by Douglas Niles, it greatly expanded wilderness adventures. Returning to D&D's roots. Ironically, wilderness exploration had been part of D&D from the beginning. Original D&D assumed adventurers would travel between dungeons. Adventurers would travel between dungeons, cross dangerous landscapes, discover forgotten ruins, encounter wandering dangers. Yet relatively little guidance existed for making long wilderness journeys interesting. Many campaigns simply skipped ahead. After 6 days of travel, you arrive. The Wilderness Survival Guide tried to make the journey itself an adventure. Fantasy adventure literature. The book was heavily influenced by fantasy fiction, where long journeys are central to the story. Works such as Tolkien's Middle-earth, Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, Fritz Leiber's Farad and the Grey Moser tales devoted considerable attention to travel, exploration, and surviving hostile landscapes. The guide brought more of that feeling into AD&D. Historical exploration. Douglas Niles also drew inspiration from military history, exploration journals, wilderness survival manuals. The result was a more grounded approach to wilderness travel. The result was, the book examined challenges including mountains, rivers, forests, deserts, swamp, severe weather, using many concepts based on real-world survival. The hex crawl tradition. The influence of early hex crawl gaming remained strong. Large wilderness maps had always existed in D&D, but this book provided much more detail for making exploration meaningful through rules covering navigation, getting lost, terrain effects, movement rates, and foraging. The wilderness became something players interacted with rather than merely crossed. Remember, this is just the fluff, guys. So I got a lot more to say than we're just going through a quick sort of a run over what they are. Expanding survival rules. One of the book's defining contributions was its extensive rules for environmental survival, including weather, visibility, starvation, water supplies, fatigue, disease, and overland movement. For many groups, these rules transform travel into an important part of gameplay rather than a narrative shortcut. Okay, in 1987, we get the Manual of Planes. Unlike the two survival guides, the Manual of Planes, written by Jeff Grubb, expanded the scope of AD&D's universe itself. Instead of focusing on new environments within the world, it explored the worlds beyond it. Building on Gary Gygax's foundation, the planes were not new to AD&D. Gary Gygax had already established much more of the game's cosmology across several earlier books, including Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, Deities and Demigods, references to the astral plane, the ethereal plane, elemental planes, demons, devils, and divine realms already existed. Jeff Grubb's achievement was bringing those scattered ideas together into one organized and greatly expanded reference. Mythology and religion. One of the book's greatest influences was world mythology. Many cultures describe heavens, hells, spirit worlds, elemental realms, afterlives. Rather than copying a single mythology, AD&D blended ideas from many traditions into its own fantasy cosmology. Fantasy literature. The book also reflected the influences of fantasy authors found throughout D&D's early inspiration, including writers such as Michael Moorcock, Roger Zelazny, Paul Anderson. Their stories frequently explored alternate realities, multiple dimensions, and a vast cosmology and vast cosmological structures, ideas that naturally fit AD&D's expanding universe. Standardizing the Great Wheel. Perhaps Jeff Grubb's greatest contribution was standardizing AD&D's cosmology. Instead of scattered references across multiple books, the game now had a coherent structure linking prime material plane, astral plane, ethereal plane, inner planes, outer planes. This provided DMs with a consistent framework for planar adventures. A foundation for future settings. Although Spelljammer and Planescape were still years away, Manual Planes laid much of the groundwork they would later build upon. Planar travel, the relationship between various planes, and the overall structure of the multiverse all became central features of later AD&D settings. The book was less a campaign setting than an architectural blueprint for AD&D's multiverse. The bigger picture. Viewed together, these three books reveal an important shift in TSR's design philosophy during the mid-1980s. Early AD&D hardbacks primarily expanded characters, monsters, magic, or treasure. These books instead expanded campaign environments. Rather than asking DMs to build bigger dungeons or create more powerful characters, TSR encouraged them to think about where adventure would take place. Dungeoneer Survival Guide transformed the Underground into a believable campaign world. Wilderness Survival Guide made overland travel an adventure instead of a transition. Manual Planes opened the multiverse, giving campaigns an entirely new frontier beyond material plane. Together, they marked an important evolution in AD&D. They shifted the focus from expanding game options to expand the worlds in which those options could be used, helping pave the way for later settings driven products such as Forgotten Realms, Spelljammer, and Planescape. Blah 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 blah. There's the setup, my friends. Oh. Sorry, I sped through that. Some of that is from TSR's own pitch. So it's, as you guys know, when I'm doing this stuff, I do my research. And I took a lot of what TSR said about these things. And yeah, that's a lot of what you're getting there is what TSR had to say about these different books. So again, I'm trying to present it in a factual way. At least this is the way D&D's seen these pieces of material, right? There's your fluff. Okay, before we go further. Okay, let's start with the Dungeoneer Survival Guide 1986. What it brings to AD&D. Expands exploration. The book expands one of AD&D's core pillars, exploration. Rather than changing combat, magic, or character creation, it adds depth to the underground adventuring by making the environment itself an important part of the game. Environmental rules, which was what Bill was mentioning here, more for the weather stuff later, but I mean, this is environmental related. Environmental rules. It introduces extensive rules for underground hazards and survival, including climbing and vertical movement, cave-ins and unstable tunnels, underground rivers and lakes, darkness and visibility, air quality, fatigue, navigation, difficult terrain. The environment itself becomes a major gameplay challenge rather than simply backdrop for encounters. Dungeon design. This is a Dungeoneer Survival Guide. Dungeon design provides dungeon masters with tools for creating more believable underground locations by covering natural cave formations, different cave types, geological features, cave ecology, underground travel, designing interconnected cave systems. The focus shifts from drawing room and corridor dungeons to creating underground environments or creating underground environments that function as living places. Campaign design. The guide goes beyond individual adventures by helping DMs design entire underground campaigns. It provides guidance for developing cave networks, underground regions, civilizations, resource distribution. I hear you. The third edition stuff was all right. I mean, I read a bit of it. Trade routes, population placement, environmental logic. Instead of isolated dungeons, the underground becomes a world that characters can explore over many adventures. Just like creating, they use the term like a living underground world. The underground world. The book greatly expands AD&D's treatment of life beneath the surface by developing underground civilizations, settlements, trade, resources, ecology, long-distance travel. It also expands material on drow, as we already talked about, and Duger and other monsters, while introducing the Darrow to AD&D, helping establish the underground as a believable campaign environment rather than simply a collection of monster lairs. Character options. Adds new material designed specifically to support underground exploration, including non-weapon proficiencies, equipment, spells, magic items. Rather than increasing characters' power, these additions focus on solving practical challenges of underground survival and exploration. Dungeon Master Toolbox functions primarily as a Dungeon Master's resource by providing guidance for running underground campaigns, creating believable hazards, building underground societies, using environmental obstacles, making exploration as important as combat. It emphasizes emphasis is less on new mechanics and more on helping DMs create immersive underground adventures. Reference material. The guide also serves as a practical reference book containing tables, charts, and supporting information that DMs can return to during campaign preparation and play. Does it change AD&D? Not in the same way as Unearthed Arcana or Oriental Adventures. It does not significantly alter the core mechanics of combat, spellcasting, or character creation. Instead, it expands AD&D's exploration pillar by providing detailed rules, tools, and guidance for underground adventures. Groups interested in realistic exploration gained a much richer framework for subterranean campaigns, while groups preferring traditional dungeon crawls could adopt as much or as little of the material as they wished. Here's I would say, the legacy of this book. The Dungeoneer Survival Guide helped establish underground exploration as a complete campaign style rather than simply the location of a dungeon crawl. Although many groups used only portions of its rules, its focus on environmental challenges, believable cave systems, and living underground societies influenced later AD&D products centered on the Underdark and other subterranean settings. It remained one of TSR's most comprehensive attempts to make exploration itself a central part of gameplay. So, the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, it's all focused on underground dungeon play. And so, old school D&D, when you said dungeons, like, it doesn't mean outside of D&D that you can't argue that a dungeon could be a tower. Or as somebody said a few years ago to me, trying to argue with me about this, a forest could be a dungeon. I was like, well, maybe outside of D&D, you could view these things this way. But I said, if you're really old school dungeon, if you're really from the old school, you would know that old school D&D viewed dungeons as an underground gimmick. And that's it. And when you read the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, there's no confusing this. It does not view dungeons as a tower above the ground. It does not view dungeons as the forest. It doesn't have this sort of wide open view of what dungeons are. Dungeons are underground. That's it. End of story. And I had a bunch of people that were freaking out at me a few years ago about this. Like, I said, old school D&D views dungeons as underground. Well, you're wrong, Stephen. I'm like, well, I'm not wrong about how old school D&D views it, but I get outside of D&D, you might want to argue with me and say dungeons are a tower above ground. I said, it's just not how old school D&D views it. But I was told I was full of shit. It's like, how could you read the dungeon? Like, I was confused because I had read this book more than once, but I was like, how could you read that and be confused and think old school D&D guys or TSR or Gary ever meant that it was something other than underground? When you talk about dungeons, it's how many floors down. It was all about the Dungeoneer survival guide is all about adding a bunch of magic, and there's a lot of cool, nifty stuff. Look, I won't go over each spell or each skill or each thing added to it. This is the point of streams like this that I'm doing is to get you to want to go search further into the books. It's not to read the book to you. It's not to tell you every option there. It is an awesome book. It really does expand the environment. So when I talk about environment, I'm not talking about weather, but I'm talking about like the way the place works, how it functions. There's details in there that people still do not use today that are good to use, that are interesting. The book is still worth money. I appreciate that, Black Rose. It is really worth looking over. It really does expand everything you could think of, right? When it comes to underground stuff. And it shows you how to make underground societies, communities, how they would exist. Like you might think to yourself, how would a community exist underground? Well, this is going to explain to you how you can run the factions underground. It improves the Underdark. A lot of things that you know about the Underdark today come from the Dungeoneer survival guide. Like the advancement of Drow, the Duger, the everything in there is advanced underground, advanced environment, and it's actually still worth reading because it's going to help you make campaigns and design dungeons. Like the Dungeoneer survival guide exists because it's still assumed that we do sandboxing. If you got modules, you don't need these books. So there's still an assumption that guys like me are still out doing sandbox play. That's why Dungeon Survival Guide exists. The Wilderness Survival Guide, it doesn't exist because they think you're still running with modules. Like, look, you can enhance a module with some of this stuff, but really, it is there for people making up their own adventures, developing their own places, their own gimmicks. And this book does a really great job. A really, really great job. Okay. Wilderness Survival Guide. What it brings to AD&D. Expands exploration. Like its companion Dungeoneer Survival Guide, this book expands one of AD&D's core pillars, exploration, just like the other one, but in a different way. Instead of focusing on adventures below the earth, it develops the wilderness into a fully supported campaign environment. It gives DMs the tools to make the journey itself as engaging as the destination. Environmental rules. Introduces detailed rules for surviving and traveling through the wilderness, including weather, temperature, visibility, terrain, fatigue, starvation, thirst, disease, navigation, getting lost, foraging, and even travel rates. The wilderness becomes an active challenge that players must overcome rather than simply a space between adventures. World building, sandbox world building. It's what these books, the sandbox I talk about, if I'm wrong, these books don't need to even exist the way they do. This is exactly to help with sandbox, and not sandbox from a module, not the redefined version. These books help with pure old school sandbox gameplay. The one I was told last year by old school D&D guys, supposed old school D&D guys, that the sandbox I talked about was wrong. Yet, ironically, these books seem to think what I talked about was a real thing. Whoever wrote them must have been confused. World building provides guidance for creating believable outdoor regions by covering forest, mountains, hills, plains, swamps, deserts, rivers, coastline, climate, seasons, elevation, and even vegetation. Rather than treating every wilderness journey the same, the book encourages each environment to have its own geography, hazards, and identity. Campaign design. The Wilderness Survival. The guide helps dungeon masters build entire wilderness campaigns, providing advice on regional design, travel routes, resource availability, natural hazards, frontier settlements, population placement, and even exploration-based adventures. Instead of wilderness serving as the road to the dungeon, it becomes the campaign itself, or can be. Hex crawl support. While it does not invent hex crawl exploration, the book greatly expands TSR support for it. It provides DMs with tools needed to make overland exploration meaningful by emphasizing discovery, navigation, resource management, travel planning, and environmental challenges. For groups that enjoyed exploration-heavy campaigns, it became one of the best AD&D references for wilderness play, period. Travel system. One of the book's biggest contributions is the expanding overland travel, is expanding overland travel into a meaningful part of gameplay. It develops rules for movement, travel pace, camping, building shelters, supplies, pack animals, river crossing, difficult terrain, hunting, fishing, fire, and even old school outdoor survival. Travel becomes something players actively plan and manage rather than something skipped over between adventures. Populating the wilderness. This book provides guidance for making the wilderness feel inhabited rather than empty by covering the placement of monsters, animals, NPCs, settlements, roads, and even ruins. The wilderness becomes a living world where encounters are shaped by geography and civilization rather than random placement. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Character options. Adds new material designed specifically to support wilderness exploration, including non-weapon proficiencies, equipment, spells, magic items, as so does the Dungeoneer's survival guide. Rather than increasing character power, these additions help players overcome the practical challenges of travel, survival, and exploration. Dungeon Master Toolbox. Functions primarily as a Dungeon Master resource by providing guidance for running wilderness campaigns, creating exploration-focused adventures using natural hazards, managing long journeys, designing believable outdoor regions. Its emphasis is on making the wilderness feel like a living environment instead of an empty map between adventures. Now, these are the similarities between the two books because they're written by the same person. And so he's trying to do the same thing, but just in different areas for both books. So when I was doing these rundowns, when I was creating these, I sort of came at it like in each area, like the Dungeon Master Toolbox. He comes at that the same way for both books. Reference material includes numerous tables, charts, reference material for supporting wilderness, travel, environmental conditions, terrain, and exploration, making it a practical resource during both preparation and play. Does it change AD&D? As I said before, it doesn't do that at all. Instead, it greatly expands AD&D's exploration pillar by providing detailed support for wilderness travel, survival, and outdoor campaigns. Groups interested in exploration gain a much richer framework for overland adventures, while the same could be said here. Groups focused primarily on dungeon crawls could incorporate only rules they found useful. So if you preferred still to get back to your dungeon stuff, that's going to be it. You're only going to use so much of this. The legacy for this book, the Wilderness Survival Guide, helped establish wilderness exploration as a more than simply traveling from one adventure to the next. It encouraged dungeon masters to treat forests, mountains, deserts, swamps, rivers, and other landscapes as adventures in their own right, where planning, resource management, and environmental challenges were just as important as combat. Even groups that ignored many of its optional survival rules often used it to reference for designing outdoor adventures, making it one of the definitive wilderness resources published for AD&D First Edition. I mean, it is the resource. Okay. So we're going to consider that the halfway mark. We're at halfway. So the two books are familiar because they're written by, they're familiar in the formatting of them because they're written by the same guy. Right. Here's him coming sort of in the formatting. He goes at dungeons in one way and then goes at the wilderness. He frames the books in very similar ways. So the way I framed these rundowns were very similar in language. Like he's trying to get the same, but in one case it's for dungeons, another case it's for the wilderness. And I'd even say in some parts he must have, I don't want to criticize, but there's a hint of copy paste in some parts. The splat books for second edition got caught doing some of the same things in 2E, where when they were making multiple splat books, you can literally find parts where it's copy paste from one book to the next. Just saying. I mean, it was so bad that some of the text is even like, it's so far, it's copied and pasted from other books where it still has statements in the writing that relate to the material from the other book. I hear you, dude. I appreciate you staying around as long as you can, Black Rose. If you got to take off, I totally understand. Check it out for later for the manual planes, and I got the worth mentioning part as well. Okay. You go crash. I know you're in Norway, which is late for you. Tomorrow is brain melting here, my friend. Before you go. Tomorrow is Old School Essentials and the OSR. And Saturday is the tabletop role-playing game Marvel Superheroes. I'm jaw-jacked tonight. That's why I'm having a hard time with some stuff. But I think I'm okay for the most part. I'm doing all right. Some parts, it's just locking up a bit on me. But that happens. It just happens. But I think I'm doing all right. If you can, though, check later in for the manual planes. I don't know if you've read that one. I know, like you said, you've had the third edition stuff, but the manual planes might be worth checking out. Yeah, you got your long one for Saturday. Check it out Sunday for the Marvel Superheroes. Watch that over again. Oh, if you can on your way home, if you got time, listen. Okay, dude. I love you. Go take care of yourself. Get some sleep. All right. In 1987, we get to the Manual of Planes. What does it bring to AD&D? Well, it expands the campaign world. While the two survival guides expanded where characters could adventure on and beneath the world, Manual Planes expands AD&D's universe beyond the material plane. It gives dungeon masters the tools to run adventures across the multiverse, turning places that have previously been mentioned only briefly into fully realized adventuring locations. It doesn't invent planar travel, it makes planar travel playable. The Great Wheel. One of the book's greatest contributions is organizing and standardizing AD&D's cosmology into what became known as the Great Wheel. It explains how the various planes relate to one another, including prime material plane, astral plane, ethereal plane, inner planes, outer planes, and the elemental planes. Positive and negative material planes as well. Rather than scattered reference across multiple rulebooks, Dungeon Masters now had a unified framework for understanding the multiverse. Alignment and the cosmos. The book explains that the outer planes are closely tied to AD&D's alignment system. Rather than alignment being simply a character trait, it becomes a fundamental force shaping the structure of the multiverse. Different alignments are associated with different outer planes, giving alignment a much greater role in the setting and helping define where many extra planars, beings, and deities reside. The planes and adventure settings. Instead of treating the planes as locations occasionally visited by powerful magic, the book presents them as complete adventure environments. Each plane is described with its own physical laws, environmental hazards, native inhabitants, methods of travel, adventure opportunities. This allows dungeon masters to create adventures that feel fundamentally different from those on the material plane. Planar travel. The guide greatly expands how characters move between worlds by covering astral travel, ethereal travel, portals, magical transportation, movement between planes, hazards of planar journeys. These rules give dungeon masters practical guidance for running adventures beyond the material plane. It expands existing magic. Rather than introducing large numbers of new spells, the book explains how existing planar magic functions. It provides the rules and context needed to properly use spells and abilities such as astral spell, etherealness magic, gate magic, plane shift magic. By explaining what these spells actually do beyond the material plane, the book makes them far easier for dungeon masters to use and play. Gods and the outer planes. The guide also expands AD&D's treatment of deities and other powerful extra-planar beings. Building upon concepts introduced in deities and demigods, it explains where gods reside within the multiverse and how the planes relate to divine realms, helping DMs better understand the cosmological structure of AD&D. The inhabitants of the planes. Rather than functioning as a monster supplement, Manual Planes explains the beings that naturally inhabit the various planes and how they fit into the cosmology. It provides context for creatures associated with elemental planes, outer planes, astral planes, ethereal planes. The emphasis is on understanding the multiverse as a living environment rather than simply adding new opponents. High-level campaigns. The book is particularly valuable for experienced campaigns. As characters gain access to powerful magic capable of crossing planar boundaries, Manual Planes provides the rules and world building needed to support adventures far beyond kingdom, continents, or even worlds. You got to think of these three books as if you were someone doing pure sandboxing adventures and building a world from scratch. These books are for if you're building it for D&D, for old school D&D, these books are valuable. And even though their settings and all that, you got to remember this is AD&D 1E. So we're just coming out of OD&D BECME sandboxing. And it's, even though there's a sort of redefined version of sandboxing, to a degree, these books go back to the old school way of sandboxing. They do understand you're going to continue to do it. Just because they're starting to try to redefine it doesn't mean they totally go all in. It's like if you look at AD&D 1E's tournament raw style, if you really read it and understand it, there's still a home game, right? And Gary's still making statements, the DM is king. He's still saying things like, you master the game through raw, and then you make all the changes you want, even to the core rules, right? He thinks if you master the game through raw, you'll understand what you're doing. So there's less worry that you're going to want to even break the game, or that you're even going to be capable of it. You're going to be able to make changes like one of the designers would from edition to edition. It's how they go from the battle metric to just a simple version of THAC0 for 2E. And that's a core rule change. They think you at home, the DM, once you master the rules, Gary believes you'll know enough to be able to do something similar yourself, and not take the complete feel or whole frame away from what D&D is, right? And that's why he says DM is king, because once you master the game, in his view, you become a real dungeon master. And at that stage, you are king. You are ruler of the rules, right? And these books are all about helping you build your own thing, like your own world, your own adventures without a module, through pure old school sandbox gameplay. Dungeon Master Toolbox functions primarily as a Dungeon Master resource by providing guidance for running planar adventures, creating adventures on different planes, designing planar hazards, using portals, integrating planar travel into existing campaigns, building campaigns that span multiple planes. Emphasis is on making the multiverse a practical setting for play rather than simply background lore. Like, why would it be helping you build campaigns if you have modules? If you depend on modules, you don't get to build your own. How do you build your own without modules? The sandbox. All right, player resource. Player-focused material is relatively limited compared to many other AD&D hardbacks. Instead of expanding character options, the book provides players with knowledge and rules needed to survive planar travel and understand dangers of adventuring beyond the material planes. Its primary audience is clearly the dungeon master. It is because it's about sandboxing. I would say the legacy of this book is the Manual Planes became the definitive guide to AD&D's cosmology by organizing, expanding ideas that had previously been scattered throughout earlier rule books. It established a common understanding of how the multiverse functions. Its presentation of the Great Wheel laid much of the foundation for later products such as Spelljammer and especially Planescape, while also influencing countless planar adventures published throughout AD&D's era. Unlike books that expanded characters, monsters, or combat, Manual Planes expanded the universe itself, giving dungeon masters an entirely new frontier in which to build their campaigns. I have a worth mentioning here with some good details. Before I get to that, though, I'm not going to go beyond the general expansion of these books, but I have a whole list of information, notes I made because I had to reread all this stuff last year when I was doing this, making all this up. And I said, I'll save a lot of detailed stuff for conversation, but I have a feeling people are either going to forget what it says in these books or they haven't really read them. A lot of people have not read these books, sadly. And they don't read them because they depend on modules. This is what I found out when I was doing a lot of this stuff over the years, even when I was younger. As much as we think books are popular and people buy them, a lot of people don't read this stuff. Like, they really don't. Like, if you depend on modules, you might not read most of this stuff at all. But why? Well, if you run nothing but modules, why would you need something to make your own campaigns? Why would you be world building if you're using Greyhawk? Most guys don't do high level gaming. High level gaming, that's where you get to the higher magic. You don't need to understand the higher magic because you're not even running most games. Like AD&D 1 DMs, 90% ran to like level 8, 10 stops. That's like the majority. You don't need to understand higher level magic. You don't need to understand higher level campaigns. You don't need guys going through the different planes. So they don't do higher level gaming. That's like 90% of AD&D 1E DMs do not DM past like level 8 and 10. Right? Most skip wilderness travel. AD&D 1E DMs mostly just go by modules. I mean, today, more than ever before, they live on modules. The idea of building your own world? Nope. The idea of building your own dungeon, like in the way that something beyond the basic shit you've learned from just the dungeons you run? Nope. Most never use these books or they skim them. I found that out with a second edition, the Splat books as well. I read them. I read them in full, even the ones I wasn't into. And I'd understand what I didn't like about them, but I read them in full. I talk to people. What about this part? No, they didn't read it. What about this? Or if they read a book, it'd be like one book out of all the other ones. Like, it's like, okay. And that's another reason I think they kept the extra Splat books really small for AD&D second edition, because they realized like a lot of people don't read this stuff. Like, if you were an old school OD&D Beckme sandbox, proper sandbox DM, the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, the Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes is beautiful. I'm a DM that runs guys up to like level 20 and beyond. Miles says he probably is watching. I know he read the little bit of the Wilderness and Dungeoneer Survival Guide. Be nice if he was here, but he knows most of the stuff, so I don't know what he'd ask. But guys are always welcome to ask me about this stuff. And I wish I could find a guy who actually, like, somebody who's really read this stuff in detail and would come on with me and talk. But here's what I find. Most of the stuff people don't know. Like, I mean, I've seen panels where I watch a guy know. I don't want to say anything. But they ran panels in the past where they have guys on. They'll talk about basic stuff in the hobby, like improvising. You're lucky if you can get like 2 minutes of the most simple statements said about this stuff. Like, what do you do to improvise? No, 2 minutes, maybe like 1 minute and 30 seconds. I figured I'd do the general stuff to get people, wanting to check it out, because there's a lot of meat in here, and then get people to want to check it out. But it's really on people. I do an overview. I don't read everything from the book on purpose. I never do that with any of the books, right? This stuff, I just wanted to keep telling people what's in it. I mean, if you want to make your own wilderness, adventure, you do this. But do you? Most guys are like Bill. Hate to say it, there's a few guys like ourselves in the hobby that don't mind doing the work. Then there's a lot of guys, that are lazy. Hobbyists are not lazy. Like, a hobbyist like myself reads these books and makes his own worlds, makes his own adventures, puts the work in, right? And makes some amazing stuff. And and this goes for designers and everything. Without these guys, we'd have nothing, right? So the designers of modules, a lot of those guys read that. Like, a lot of these books actually help modules that get made later as well, right? But it's sad to see how few people at home use them. So I'd almost say the Dungeoneer Survival Guide or the Wilderness Survival Guide is more used by staff members at TSR than is by guys at home using it. Even though it's written for the wider audience, it ends up like being staff members and people that are designers that end up reading these books more than anybody. At least that was my experience. I want to turn people on to them because I keep talking about the sandboxing. I'm like, well, if you're going to sandbox, here's some great books. And I don't even care if you're just running AD&D second edition or if you're Beckme. Help. These books, there's versions of them for third edition and that. But even if you go back to the AD&D 1E books, which I think are better overall, because they do it in a meaningful way that I personally like. They're good to read if you want to make your own stuff. But if you're just fucking lazy, which are most people, I don't hate people for it, but it is what it is. Most people don't read this stuff. I'm like, no wonder most people argue with me about the dungeon thing. I was like, dungeons are considered underground by old school D&D. Most guys don't know that. Most of them are either they're half-assed in the hobby or too lazy to know it. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you, kid. Okay. All right. Worth mentioning. All right. All three books. Together, these books represent TSR's strongest push towards environment-focused campaign source books during the AD&D first edition era. Rather than expanding characters or combat, they expand where campaigns can take place. They are best viewed as campaign toolkits rather than rule expansions. Again, why would you need toolkits if you're running modules and not making your own stuff? I made my own stuff. That's why I like these books. But if you're just running modules, yeah, it is what it is. If you're not doing sandboxing, it is what it is. Each combine optional rules, world building advice, worked examples, and references material instead of focusing primarily on new classes, races, or monsters. Each encouraged the environment itself to become part of the adventure rather than simply the backdrop. 100% Bill. 100%. I call these books freedom. It's given that TSR was going into the module money-making system. Gary, here's what I love about Gary Gygax. I don't care what anybody says about him. He was a bad businessman in some ways. In some ways, Bill. And we have to appreciate this. For good reasons. He was a hobbyist like me and you, Bill. Basic modules, but even if you don't do this is what I mean by hobbyist. He still was the guy in the sandbox world. So even though modules, TSR is leaning into modules because really that is better for business than sandboxing. Redefining the sandbox in a deceitful way was better for business. Not good for us, the community, but better for them making more money with money grab modules, right? Gary still was a nerd like me and you. Gary was still a hobbyist. And as much as he wanted to do good business, this shit tripped him up. And I love him for it. That's part of why I love Gary Gygax. Because he was still a nerd at heart, right? He would do things I know the company was probably not happy with him about. Like supporting sandbox, pure sandbox gaming was, think about it, TSR is going in this direction. Modules, money grab, redefine sandbox, trick the audience, propaganda and lies of what a real sandbox is. All so they can do money grab modules to trick us and make more money off us. And Gary's like, yeah, but I'm a nerd. I'm here, let's make these books. These are going to be good for the guys that want to make their own adventures in their own settings, in their own world, which is completely anti the business model of TSR at the time. People, even though he's out by 85, you got to understand he influences a lot of the stuff happening in 86 and 87. So when I say Gary, I get that he's out by 85, but understand he influences what you're seeing here. He got this stuff started. This stuff comes out under his watch, not really under his watch. He's gone by 85, but he's pushing to have this stuff come out later. Like the work is already being done for it. Now this goes against their model, and they probably just put it out right anyway, thinking they're going to make money off the books anyway. So trust me, it is greed that gets the books out, but it's not helping the model of money grab. This is making it that in reality with these books, you don't need modules. All right, Sandbox already makes it that you don't need the modules anyway. But these books are going to help you even further. Like if you get these, and that's why it disappoints me to find out many years later, decades later, most people never read them, Bill. That's the shitty thing with our customers. Most customers were lazy and gave in. I hate to say it. This is just the plain truth. They gave in to the lazy money grab modules. Here's what I like about convenience being taken away. That's why I don't like modules personally. Modules create convenience. And when we create convenience, we will always lean into the convenience instead of putting the work in. When the convenience doesn't exist, Bill, and we're forced to put the work in, we will. And we make greatness when we do. But the pressure to have to make your own stuff needs to be there. The modules were a damaging force for what we do with D&D. To this day, I believe that 100%. They were good as an example of play. I understood modules as to teach you the game, right? So initially putting out like a set of modules for like Beckme or something made sense. One set, you play them, the rest you got to make yourself. Good. Okay. That I understand, right? To teach, I understand. But when they started making modules to make money beyond teaching, I came in 87. I still realized by 89, I put it together in my head. Modules have poisoned us from creating our own shit. And I met guys in the 70s that had to create their own stuff. So understand, I'm being taught by guys that really, really knew their shit and had to work before modules were a big thing. And beyond certain set, if you don't do your own stuff, make your own worlds, make your own adventures, you weren't playing. Right? So either do it or you'll run your one little set of shit and that's it. And what are modules going to do? They're going to make us fucking lazy. They're going to make us lazy. They're absolutely going to do the thinking for us that we can achieve. What happened with miniatures? Think about this, Bill. From 1974 to the 90s, most people do pure theater of the mind. Now, in 2026 and the old school, most of the guys cannot do pure theater of the mind combat. It would mentally cripple them. They can barely handle it. What the fuck happened? How do we go from 80% of DMs being able to handle it? I'm with the Beck. I love the Beckme approach. I love the modules to teach. But when you go beyond the teaching method, it makes us lazy. That's why I say the miniature thing made guys lazy mentally. It's like improvising. Sandbox guys know you can improvise. It actually is not hard. But it's like anything, Bill. If you don't do it, it becomes harder for you coming out of the box to do it. Right? It's going to be a little harder starting if you just don't do it at all. And then guys convince themselves they get lazy. The book does all the thinking. What happened to the rules? We went from simple rules where the game depends more on the game master's skill, talent, and performance, and where the DM is king, to you get to tournament style with Rob. The book becomes king. And the more complicated the rules, why were they there? They weren't complicated because, it's some really intelligent gimmick. It's complicated because now the book is doing all the thinking for you that you can do on your own. It's again like the miniatures. You can run combat without miniatures easily. We knew that from 74 to the 90s. Easily. Now, guys, they talk as if you could never have done that. And they really do. Bill, you've heard this stuff. You hear them talk like you can't really do combat without miniatures. Now, me and you know you can do combat like breathing air without miniatures. Easily. No issue at all. So modules, to me, I clued in. They harm us because here's the problem with a hobby like this. A hobby like this, to get the best out of it, needs us to do work. So every time you put a layer of convenience in, you bring in, of course, you bring in some really like fucking lazy, mentally lazy people into a hobby that's based on a mind game. And the more convenience you create for us, the lazier we get, the worse we get, and the worse we produce. And what happens? Now the company is really making money off you. Now you do depend on WotC making your adventure. You depend on TSR. They have crippled your fucking mind. One that you can use to make your own stuff. They've crippled you. And now you got to pay them money to be able to play the game, run the game. Convenience makes us lazy in a hobby that depends on us to put an effort in. And it makes us forget that we can do things on our own. Like, take one of the DMs right now and say, go run Traveler. Sounds easy, but you want to know what most guys do with Traveler now? I caught them. They're as guilty as fuck. This I get mad at them too. I'm like, wait. You're running Traveler, right? And they're like, yeah. Like original Traveler? Yeah. Are you planning that stuff out? Yeah, Kate. I'm doing that. You don't do that with Traveler. What do you mean? You you purposely improvise. It's actually an expectation of play because the game designers know that you can. So they don't want you to prep. It's you let players lead. You make shit up as they go because you cannot predict what players will do. So instead of pretending you can, you just let them lead and you make up stuff to support what they're doing. You build everything off of their actions. It's old school sandbox. Traveler is built around that. That's an expectation of the guy running the game. You don't plan ahead. And any true Traveler player, say an experienced Traveler player, because I seen a guy, this is how I knew it. Because one guy comes, he quit a campaign. He's like, or not a campaign, but he quit like after 3 sessions. Like, dude, you're playing Traveler. At first, he's excited. 3 sessions later, he's like, I quit. Why? That guy's forcing us into stuff like a railroad. Like a railroad. This Traveler, what are you talking about, railroad? He's like, yeah, that guy plans his shit out. I was like, he does? He's like, yeah, dude, I caught him. He's trying to railroad us, force us into stuff. And Traveler. He's like, yep. Because you guys are doing stuff that he has nothing prepped for, so he would have to improvise all of it, right? He's like, we were trying, but he's trying to force us back into this thing he has planned. I'm like, that's not even Traveler. That's completely anti what Traveler is. Complete anti. That's not Traveler at all. You're not even running. Forget you're not a Traveler game master at all. You are full of shit. Get rid of the prep work. Don't railroad. That's not Traveler. Traveler expects you to improvise because the designers understand that your laziness might make it hard for you, but they understand without you being lazy that you can. So if you can, that's why the designer doesn't give a fuck. He puts it on you because there's an expectation. And if you don't have the talent to improvise, what the designer's saying to you without being ashamed, doesn't ask for forgiveness. If you're not talented enough to do this, what he's saying is you don't. And he's not being mean. He's just expecting hobbyists, because it's an original Traveler. He's expecting hobbyists to be the ones gaming with it. And hobbyists would always put up their best people to run the game because there's an expectation of hobbyists to put your best guys ahead because there's an expectation of performance and skill and talent. I was like, that guy playing it. So, and I've caught now just more than one doing this with Traveler trying to railroad. Oh my, that's rotten. That's rotten. That's a bottom of the fucking barrel. Shit. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. That's straight. Like you're so mentally handicapped, you can't run Traveler properly. That's embarrassing. That's fucking embarrassing. That's shameful, embarrassing. Like put Traveler down, go back to D&D, plan out your fucking railroad, and shut the fuck up. Like, just what are you doing? It's like pretending to run Traveler. Like, piss off. Like, I don't get that. Traveler's not made for people that are lazy. Like, just put the game down. It's not for you. Just saying. It was embarrassing to catch people doing that, planning things out in Traveler that way. Like, no. It's like, well, I remember one guy even giving me a heads up before he starts it. He's like, yeah, I got these hooks. I was like, hooks? He's like, yeah, whole adventure hooks. And if they go down here, they're going to do it. No, stop. He's like, what? I'm like, dude, you don't have hooks. You have situations. Hooks get developed through what players are going to choose to go down. Like you're the closest thing to a hook you have is there's a job over here that can help them get the money to pay for the thing. It's all simple shit. You develop based on what they're going to do and how they interact with it. Like you don't think that way. It's all you just put some things in there and see how they're going to deal with it. And you have to come at the game the same way players do. I don't get that. That was embarrassing. Anyway, Dungeoneer Survival Guide includes Deep Earth, a sample underground setting demonstrating how to build a complete subterranean campaign. So it gives you an example. This is another one of these great examples, Bill. Instead of having 50 of them, it gives you one example. So it includes the Deep Earth, a sample underground setting demonstrating how to build a complete subterranean campaign. So if you get the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, it comes with an already built-in thing that you can either take as a frame to start your own or even use some of this. It introduces rules for mining. And basically different types of mining and tunneling, emphasizing that underground is a living world rather than simply a dungeon map. It explains how underground civilizations obtain food, including fungal agriculture, water, minerals, and how to maintain trade, making the setting feel more believable. Makes light management a major survival concern. Torches, lanterns, light producing magic becomes valuable resources that must be managed carefully. Encourages dungeon masters to think in 3 dimensions with shafts, cliffs, ledges, vertical caverns, and multiple elevations becoming important parts of dungeon design. So it really teaches you how to build a world underground, how to get food, the lighting system, how to do mining, how to basically shape your world underground for real, how to live. Like it really goes into details that will blow your fucking mind. If you're trying to guess, how would you live underground? How would you go about that? This book goes deep diving and gives you examples instead of just trying to give you vague explanations. It's a fucking beautiful thing and teaches these gimmicks really, really well. And like major trade between different factions, how all that could work. Wilderness Survival Guide features one of AD&D's most comprehensive weather generation systems, allowing changing weather conditions to become part of regular play. As Bill was talking about, expands wilderness adventures beyond land travel by covering rivers, water crossings, and even boats. Treats hunting and fishing and food gathering as meaningful gameplay rather than background flavor. So what it is to go hunting, right? Basically to go fishing, what you would do, how you would do fishing, different ways of food gathering, where it's actually an activity you can do in game, not just some little quick thing. Oh, I go fishing, I roll it. No. This thing really shows you how to explore the side of the game and have fun with it. Shows how roads, villages, trade routes, and borders shape wilderness regions, making the landscape feel inhabited rather than empty. One of AD&D's strongest resources for running hex crawl style campaigns, even though it did not invent the concept, it advances it. Manual Planes explains that different planes operate according to their own physical laws, including changes to gravity, movement, time, magic, and elemental dominance. Introduces the idea that many planes are layered or effectively infinite, making them fundamentally different from traditional adventure locations. Fully explains how the astral plane and the ethereal plane function, turning concepts previously mentioned in the core rulebooks into practical locations for adventures. Presents the planes as entire realities, each with its own nature, laws, inhabitants, and methods of travel, rather than simply distant locations. Includes random planar encounter material to help populate the multiverse. Contains diagrams illustrating the relationships between various planes, helping dungeon masters understand AD&D's Great Wheel cosmology. Explains where many gods, outsiders, and other extraplanar beings fit within the multiverse. Features artwork by Jeff Easley, providing one of the earliest visual interpretations of AD&D's multiverse. The books are so detailed. Again, like I just want to go over this again. Like Dungeoneer Survival Guide, like it really does go into deep earth. It gives you like a whole sample place, and then gives you everything from food, how you get food, how you get water, how you get lighting, how you actually cave out where you're living, how you do trades, and creates a world, turns it into a world where you think in these different dimensions through shafts, cliffs, and ledges, and vertical caverns, and multiple evolutions or evolution they become important parts of the design. Wilderness goes into the weather system, as we talked about. So different weather conditions. It shows you not just how to go over land, where it does increase hex crawl stuff, the detail is there, but it also goes into crossing rivers, water crossings themselves, and how to do boating. It goes into details about hunting, how you can actually really get involved with this stuff. Go hunting, go fishing, food gathering. So they're not just background dice roll stuff that you do randomly. It really shows you how can I say, from roads, villages, trade routes, and borders, how they shape the different region areas, and how to inhabit these places, how to make them feel like they're alive with people, animals, and everything else in the world. The Manual of Planes teaches you about basically the physical laws, gravity, movement, time, magic, elemental dominance. Introduces ideas that many planes are layered or effectively infinite, making them fundamentally different from traditional adventure locations. Fully explains how the astral and ethereal plane function, turning concepts previously mentioned in the core rulebooks into practical locations for adventure. So when you get to the high level adventures, if you actually do it properly, well, you could travel to different planes. You get this book so you can actually understand first. It just teach you how that magic works. So there's vague explanations in the other books. This one clarifies that magic, how it works, and then gives you the details you need to understand what it would be like to go to the ethereal plane or astral plane and what you can do there. And so DMs can really function with that stuff. They can really run it at high levels. Like, these books are so fucking valuable. The Dungeoneer Survival Guide, the Wilderness Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes. They're not throwaway, and they're books that go beyond AD&D 1E. The education you'll get from them are details that aren't just based on some AD&D 1E rules. These are concepts that will be true if you have done OD&D, BECME, AD&D 1E, AD&D 2nd edition. Fuck, this stuff is so good that 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5E could all have stuff from this stuff applied, because it's not just rules they're talking about, it's common sense concepts, like how to build an underground world. You could build an underground world for a 5E game. Shit, you could do this if you were to get Savage Worlds. You can use, there's so many games that this stuff can be applied to. Just like, imagine you were doing an underground world and you were doing it for the vampire world, a world of darkness. The Dungeoneer survival view. Imagine you went back in time in the world of darkness, which stuff like that could happen. You could do a time travel thing. What a vampire, he's going back to medieval times, like from the modern world. The overland stuff will literally build an entire overland world for you, for this guy to walk through. The Manual of Planes, because it's not all about rules and these are concepts. Man, the concepts are amazing, and they can even explain to you how you might make your own little fucking places. So if you're a world builder yourself, this is the great thing about sandboxing. That's why I say it's more than just one game. It's like sandboxing. How would you build a world? Well, if you're really having a hard time from scratch, these set of books will teach you for real how to build a world, how to build adventures, especially from scratch. What would you do? What would you introduce? These are these things. And yes, I know Gary Gygax is out by 85, but don't misunderstand. A lot of work you see even beyond 85 has his handprints all over this stuff. And it definitely is not the path that TSR was on. We're lucky to have gotten these books, because TSR was on a money grab gimmick of making you fucking lazy, making you depend on them, so you keep giving them your money and depend on them to think for you. That's the tournament stuff in Raw. Raw, the book is king, not the DM. If you got to go Raw and the book is the authority, the book is king. Whatever overrules. If a player, a rule lawyer, that's where we get the rule lawyer assholes. OD&D, a rule lawyer is someone who helps. But if the DM says, this is the way it is, okay, boss, you're the boss. That's it. BECME, DM is the boss. You might have some advice because you read the material or say this is in the book, but the DM says something. Okay, sorry, yep, you're the boss. Get to the tournament. AD&D raw point of view from players. And DM says, this is the way I run it. That's all it says in the book, and the guy will keep arguing with you. It's the first time we run into players that argue. And the stereotype of the asshole rule lawyer comes from AD&D 1E raw, not from OD&D, not from Beckme, and not even from second edition. It comes from the raw approach of AD&D 1E. That's where the asshole rule lawyer comes from. Because the book is king with AD&D 1E raw. But Gary says in the Dungeon Master Guide, the DM is king. Why does he say it? Because he's saying the DM has authority over the book. And once a DM masters the game through running it raw, he is as well to do as any game designer working for TSR. So just like they can mess with the core rules from 1E to 2E, from original to Beckme, from Beckme to AD&D 1E. What he's saying is even the at-home DM, once he masters the rules, will be capable of making changes to the core without breaking the essence and feel of what D&D is. Because of D&D, if Dungeons and Dragons really was one thing, you can't experiment and you can't go from one edition to another. There is an idea and a feel that he is trying to get the game the entire time. There you go. Coverage of the 3 books is done. That's the overview. There you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Sorry to get a little preachy, but it's just there's so many views out there. There's an ocean of people on the other side of what I'm saying, but there should not be. Because if you're really old school D&D, most people, if they were the real thing, they would agree with me, not be opposed to what I'm saying. Sadly, in 2026, the people that call themselves old school, instead of the majority being with me, a real old school person who talks about the reality of what was going on at the time, I happen to be a raindrop, even though what I say is true, against an ocean of agenda bullshitting people that lie about what the old school is and what old school D&D was. It amazes me. 2 years ago, 7 years ago, I said I prefer pure theater of the mind over miniatures. And I said I don't mind miniatures, but pure theater of the mind is something we practiced a lot in the old school. It's common, and it's something I prefer. I got attacked and told that I was a liar and that 99% of people did miniatures. The Dungeons bill, the Dungeons. 2 years ago, I said old school D&D looks at Dungeons as being an underground gimmick. And it's, want to know what I was told? I was full of shit, that I was a liar. That Dungeons, the Forest was a dungeon. The above tower was a dungeon. I said, maybe outside of D&D, you could make arguments like this, that some framework on that, fine. But old school D&D does not see the above tower as a dungeon, does not see the forest as a dungeon. It sees the underground cavern area as a dungeon. It speaks about it that way. The language will all tell you clearly that dungeons are viewed as an underground gimmick. Now, I'm real old school D&D. So when I said it, I was talking correctly about real old school D&D. I was told I was a liar. I talked about the sandbox bill, where OD&D and Beckme started, and where these 3 books keep supporting the sandbox. I'm told that's not even true. Last year, or no, this year, I did a video about how I like to run sandbox. A lot of background noise. Sorry. Very petty ghetto shit. There we go. But I did a video a few months ago explaining how I like to do sandbox. Now, I said I like to run sandbox the old school way, the old school D&D way. So I explained in my video, I'm talking about sandbox from OD&D and BECME and what these 3 books assist on. The Wilderness Survival Guide, the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, and the Manual of Planes, all is assisting to this sandbox play from OD&D and BECME. And you'll also find it very clearly in Traveler. I talk about me running it the old school way. Want to know what I was told? That, Bill, that's what I told him. I said, at least at the very least, I don't care what they argue at D&D, old school D&D, never seen them as dungeons, right? So they're above ground is not viewed as a dungeon by D&D. I don't care what anybody says. But I did a video so many months ago explaining how I do sandbox. I go through it. I got told I was full of shit, that sandbox are in the modules, and I'm lying, and I don't know what I'm talking about. Obviously, the guys that were calling me a liar didn't know what they were talking about. I'm talking about old school sandboxing from OD&D and BECME and what these 3 books assist on. They're not there to assist with the Temple of Elemental Evil and the so-called redefined sandboxing with that. They're there to help with pure sandboxing, where you make a setting from scratch and you make an adventure from scratch, right? Where you make your own stuff, right? Because that was practice, pure freedom, not module redefining of sandboxing. It's, imagine TSR is sort of in a warped world. It's trying to redefine it to sell more modules, but at the same time, it's in a warped place because there's so much work being done towards accepting the reality of what sandbox is outside of modules. It's a contradiction, and there's a lot of TSR contradicting stuff back then, because you have a business trying to make money, but at the same time, you have nerds working in the business that are honest hobbyists. And Gary had a clash. Gary himself, because some of the work that comes out after 85 is still basic. His hands are still on it. And he's a contradicting figure because one side of him wants to make money, but another side of Gary, and that's what I love about Gary Gygax, was the real kept creeping up on him. He is a hobbyist like me and you, Bill. So as much as he wants to make money, and the hobbyist stuff is not good for making money. That's what I got to tell you, Bill. This is why it's 2 different people in one body. Gary is the guy trying to make money, but the hobbyist stuff that's no good for making money and only supporting a smaller group of people is still functioning. So the sandbox is actually not good for making money. The trick stuff is, so as much as I say it's a money grab, it is better for making money, but it's not what a hobbyist would do if they cared about the hobby, if they had passion for the game. If you have passion for the game, you would do stuff that would harm you trying to do business. And Gary was a weird character because parts of what he would do would be to make money, but parts of what he would do would be to sabotage his attempts to make money, right? Because he's a hobbyist too. And so sandboxing, all this exists, but you got to go back in time and actually read the books. You have to live in the era. You have to be out with the majority of gamers in the hobby to actually know what the old school was, to actually know what real old school D&D was. A lot of the YouTubers here today are absolute fakes. They're guys that pretend to represent a part of the hobby that they don't. They don't even understand it. Most of the guys on X that pretend to be old school don't even know what it really is. And that's why guys like you, Bill, like me, I get guys like you, Bill, and there's other guys that are way more private than you that are real old school guys, just like you are, Bill. And the reason they relate with me is because they know what I'm saying is right. And they tell me, you tell me in public, and I appreciate that. I really do. I really do. I trust me, with so many guys being full of shit, it's nice to have a real guy like yourself come by and go, yeah, Steven's telling the fucking truth. I am. Now, I know you know, especially, Bill, you're a Mystera BECME guy. You know, absolutely I don't lie about this stuff, right? Check out you can't know what I know about Mystera and BECME and be full of shit, right? You got to know your shit. You got to have been there. Guys, a lot of guys in private, because of my reputation, don't want people to know that they talk to me. But these are real old school guys that know everything I'm saying is right. And what do a lot of these guys say about the YouTubers around here and the guys on X that are fake? They go, you'll hear this commonly said about YouTubers that are old school. They don't really play the game. Do you want to know why they say stuff like this about the guys? Because they hear them and it doesn't line up with what they know the reality and truth to be. So when they hear a panel of guys and they hear a so-called old school D&D guy saying you can't really do combat without miniatures, real old school guys, the real fucking deal, know these guys are absolutely full of shit. But here's what else they know. Bill, this is why they watch guys like me, and they're private about this. Why? Because when guys like me come out and tell the truth, here's the problem, Bill. This is why a lot of guys shut their mouth. They're intimidated about speaking out loud. Because when guys like me tell the truth, I get attacked. And that's what they see. Think about it. I said the truth about miniatures 7 years ago. I got crucified 3 streams a week, 4 to 5 videos done about me every week as a content creator over saying miniatures, the truth about miniatures. I got fucking attacked by a good 10 or 15 fucking YouTubers for talking the truth about dungeons being considered underground by D&D. No, it's forced. I get attacked, streams done about me, videos done about me because I told the fucking truth. I was there when the magic was made. Most talk about the shadow magic, not the real true magic. And you really feel like they're just making shit up as they go. They just do. I like it. Like you're a guy who's come through Mystera, which I know is a sandbox world. So you really get it. Like you came into the hobby before I came into the hobby. Here's the difference. I don't lie. I came in 87. So some of the guys that started in the 70s, they're guys that taught me shit. The difference is I was at least there in the mix. And I really cared about the hobby, and I was a hobbyist, and I really read the material, and I took serious what I was told. I respected what the hobby was. I have a passion for the hobby. I have a passion for what we do, and I have a passion for what real old school Dungeons and Dragons is. I don't have an agenda to push. I don't lie. What you're seeing today is guys that rewrite the history of the hobby, calling D&D a war game. When I came in 87, not a single fucking Dungeons and Dragons guy called what we do wargaming. Not a single one. Not a single one. That is completely new shit. That is all fucking made up. That's a fucking lie. Because here's what happened in 74. The wargamers hated D&D. And they started accusing Gary and them of trying to replace their hobby. And here's what they said by 78. Why did the wargamers completely drop this? And only less than 10% of wargamers actually crossed over and tried D&D. And most of them took off to different games, making their own games because they said D&D is not wargaming at all. That's why Traveler got made. That's why Dragon Quest got made. Right? Because they felt D&D had nothing to do with wargaming. It was an insult towards any form of it. And by 78, the reason wargamers gave up attacking D&D is they realized tabletop role-playing games are not war games. And you can find the statements all over the place. By the time I came in 87, not a single D&D guy said what we did was wargaming, and over 80% of DMs were doing pure theater of the mind combat. Period. End of fucking story. So this whole D&D as a war game thing is completely new and completely made the fuck up. Made up. Complete made up agenda. To pitch miniatures that was never a big thing from 74 to the early 90s. Completely made up. Nobody argued this shit. Nobody. Even the early days of the fucking internet. Can you go back to the forums? There's no wargaming D&D. You go back to Merc and the gaming on Merc before OpenRPG came out. That program, which was sort of an advanced version of Merc gaming, Merc text-based gaming, not the forum post gaming, but like the actual just text play, where you had to do the different things to play in text before there was audio options. Can you go back to none of them called D&D a war game? That is completely new language. That is completely new and alternate. It has nothing to do with old school. It's like, yeah, we never called it wargaming because over 80% of guys are using miniatures, or not using miniatures, doing pure theater of the mind. When I see miniatures come to the table, it wasn't even guys using them. And here's what miniature gameplay to me was this. I seen a few guys who used drawings on piece of paper and never used miniatures, but used pieces. They might have it like, here they come with the dragon. So they get the dragon or the orc or the whatever. They got like one or two pieces, maybe. Want to know what the players were? G.I. Joe figures. Or chip pieces. And that's on the few tables that ever bothered to use stuff like this. And you want to know why that was? 99% of the small group of people that used this stuff could not afford all the metal miniatures. Now, I won't lie to you. Did I see a wargaming group from Wargaming that played a bit of D&D at the club I was at? Yes. Right? There's a military group of guys that went from playing wargaming to playing D&D. That's the only wargaming group I know because so few ever crossed over from wargaming to D&D. They had miniatures, but it wasn't D&D miniatures. They didn't even buy the D&D optional miniatures. They had their wargaming figurines. That's all they had. And they were like you find one group with them. And they already had them. So it was all a delusion. Again, the dungeon stuff. I couldn't believe it 2 years ago when I came up with my dungeon video about D&D, like dungeons being underground in D&D. I was told I was a liar. It's like, dude, have you read the Dungeon Survival Guide? Like, you know D&D sees all dungeons as underground, cavern, underground areas? Like, you know that, right? You're calling me a liar, but I'm not lying. Not even making this up. The whole focus on dungeons is down. Somebody floors down. Underground. All underground. The underground living world. The Underdark appears because of fucking dungeon play. I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it that I was being told I was a liar. But I knew I was being told I was a liar by fakes. Like, here I am, a real old school guy who knows the truth. Why aren't more people supporting me? I was so disappointed by that one. I was disappointed because I was like, if you're all old school, you should be supporting me. I actually did the video thinking a lot of guys would actually agree. Like, they'd be like, yeah, he's right. Because the reason I made that video is I see a guy say dungeon play. He's talking about the dungeon. And I swear to fuck, he says, a forest can be a dungeon. And so I responded because a lot of guys agree with that. And I had done my video to respond to that saying, well, no, in D&D, a forest can't be a dungeon because that's not how D&D views dungeons. My response was to tell him and others that dungeons are all considered underground by D&D. And him, this other YouTuber, and a bunch of guys around him told me I was a liar. I am? I am? Don't you know old school Dungeons and Dragons? How can you say I'm a liar? I mean, in the world I came from, you would be the one should be embarrassed. It'd be like if I was sitting there back in the old school and say from 87, say before I start dealing, say like 1990 or 89. If you came to the open fucking hobby and told me in front of other old school guys, if I said, man, dungeons are underground, and that's how D&D sees it, and you said, no, you're a fucking liar. Every guy in that place would be a mix of laughing at you and correcting you, and everybody would support my statement. But on here, with a bunch of fucking fakes who know nothing about old school D&D, I had the audience and a bunch of the so-called old school D&D guys calling me a liar. Fucking embarrassment. Like, I don't care if you're sick of D&D, but do you even know what it is? Like, I heard some guys out here, we're sick of D&D. Now I'll hear them explain what they think D&D is. Oh, I'm sick of D&D. I'm like, okay, what's D&D? And they'll say what D&D. Nope, that's not D&D. So you're not sick of D&D. You don't even know what Dungeons and Dragons is to be sick of it. You don't even know what it is to be sick of it. I hear these guys get all spiteful about D&D. Not just there's the so-called fake old school D&D guys, and there's these guys that are anti-D&D, especially old school. Now I'll hear them describe what old school D&D is. I'm like, you don't even know. You're pissed off at something that doesn't even exist. You don't even know what old school D&D is to be mad at it. All right, Philo. I'm glad you were here for whatever amount of time. I love you, Philo. The manual stuff is really good. All that stuff is good. All right, cool. Take care of yourself, buddy. I appreciate you stopping by and being here for a while. Sorry to get on a rant, guys. At least I'm not cursing that much. At least I'm not cursing that much. My Norway friends always have to. That's why I like to start early as I can possibly start most of the time. I have a few people in my audience, especially regulars like Black Rose and Philo, that like by 8 o'clock, it's like 2 and 3 in the morning for them. So if you guys wonder why I start early all the time. Or at least I try to. I only do it when I can, but when I can, I do, right? Usually to get some of the late bloomers in. But yeah. I'll promise you this, Bill. I think you'll appreciate this. Tonight was just a general stuff on that, but tomorrow night I won't complain as much. The negativity and complaining will be gone. But I had to bring that stuff up because you don't understand. I took about, like, if you count the dungeon stuff and the recent sandbox stuff, I took a lot of heat over that shit. And I felt like tonight I just wanted to call these people out. I wanted to call some stuff out that I had just let go. Like, Bill, you don't know. I let this stuff go. I was actually really cool about it and never made videos and I never did streams on this stuff complaining. And tonight I just wanted to fucking let it out. Let it fucking out. Just let it out. Because it's just like, I'm going to bring the goods this time. I'm going to bring the evidence. I'm going to bring the goods and explain just how fucking wrong these people are and how much they don't know about old school D&D. The guys that first complained about old school D&D, most of them have no fucking clue what the game is. When you hear their explanation of old school D&D, I'm like, you don't even fucking know. So you're bitching about something you clearly know next to nothing about. Right? You fucking incompetent fucks. Not you, Bill, but I'm talking about the YouTubers that complain about D&D. Incompetent fucking morons that don't know what D&D is. They don't even know what it is to hate it properly. Like, if you want to hate it, at least hate what it really is, not what you say it is, which clearly does not line up with what it really is, right? And then we get to the so-called fake old school guys today. All guys that, Bill, most of them barely played in the old school. They came in 20 years late, and they entered back into the hobby after WotC already exists, and miniatures are a regular thing with WotC. What they don't know is they don't know the real history. They don't know WotC made the miniature plastic. They didn't know that. Seriously, Bill, I'm not joking about this. My coverage of WotC being the ones that introduced miniatures into the hobby on a big scale, the guys that are pretending to be old school, they didn't know that, but they should. Why would I say they're fake? Because, Bill, if you're like me and you're really in the old school time, you know they don't exist. You know that. You just know. Right? But if you really weren't here, you wouldn't know that. If you came in after WotC and you're pretending to be part of this, you might not know WotC introduces plastic miniatures on a big scale after they take over D&D. Oh, it's not even that. It's just a hit back. I just want to call some people out. Did I have it tough? It's trying to correct the conversations around here. It's not just you guys that will see this either, Bill. You got to understand. Like I appreciate that you like the coverage of the books, but some of the extra stuff I'm saying here is because my haters are going to watch this. Other YouTubers are going to watch this. And I know this because when they talk about what I say on my streams, they only talk about what I say on my streams because they know. They know what I say because they've watched. And I know they watch. So I understand you're an audience right now for me live. But I want you to know, as someone talking, that I understand over the next week, this audience won't just be you. I'm not ranting at you. That's why I want to clarify. Of course, I love you, Bill. I love Philo. I love Black Rose. I love all you guys. None of these rants are aimed at you guys at all, completely. But I understand my haters that have disagreed with me are watching. I understand other old school tabletop role playing game D&D YouTubers will watch this, and I know they will. Right? I know directly that they will, and I want them to know that they're full of shit. Because these are the same guys that told me I was a liar. They will watch us. Oh, of course. But you also got to understand with the platform, you have influence, and it's not just private either. It's like, look, there's some people in the audience that if I didn't speak up, they wouldn't be watching me now. Black Rose. Black Rose is a great example. Want to know what happened? Black Rose disagreed with me at first. Even got into a back and forth with me. If I don't speak up, I don't correct the record. And understand, Bill, I have people watching. So with a platform, you get to have influence. And I get there's some people out there that don't care. Like they just want to worry about their own table and their own private situation. It's a bigger issue to me. Right? It's always a bigger issue to me. I understand I have some influence, especially with certain guys. I'll make them embarrassed to say certain things. Right? I will correct the record. I will make the conversation around these things more honest. And I know I have that kind of influence when I speak up in certain ways. And I just do. I do. I'll say things that nobody else is saying, and I'll correct something nobody else has corrected. And I swear to fuck, Bill, this is how I know. I watch guys stop lying. And they actually start saying things that I've said. And they're not getting it from anywhere else. There's no other platform. There's no other guy saying it. There's no other YouTuber saying it. It's not like there's a lot of other guys saying what I say sometimes. I say it just as a raindrop in the ocean. And you start having influence when you see other YouTubers adjust their language to what you say. Right? Especially when you made a point so strong, they know you can, in the argument, win that. They know there's stuff out there that will back you up in a way. They're done. So once you see that happen more than once over the years, I just start knowing I'm talking to not just you guys. And I don't just take this as independent. And in all honesty, Bill, if I don't speak up about certain things, the influence I can have gets wasted. I don't correct the record on anything. The honest conversation doesn't happen. And then these vampires control the hobby. They control the dialogue. They control everything we think and say. So for that to be countered, someone like me has to speak up because nobody else is. That's the shitty part, right? Oh, I know. But it's because I give a shit about the hobby. They don't just hate me. There's part of them that hates me, part of them that adjust. There's a lot of things going on, Bill. It's just I've taken a lot of years to really analyze what is happening. I do. They copy what I say. Just think about it. There's streams out there where guys go on the stream and they start saying stuff and they're trying to say what I said, but they're trying to say it in their own words. But it's all just copying me. It's like the D&D survival thing. I could tell you, Bill, every other old school D&D guy talked about this being a combat game, meat grinder. Think about that. Only a few months ago, I finally come up with detailed coverage explaining to them where I knew they were incorrect. That the game is not a combat game. It's a survival game where it doesn't have to be a meat grinder. You avoid most combat. And once you learn this from your early experience as a player, most characters after that can survive and for long periods of time without just constant death. And that the game is meant to be played that way. It is a survival game. It's meant to be played that way. This is designer intent. Every other old school D&D YouTuber didn't know that. They all talk about it being a combat game, meat grinder, where you just play it as if it's going to be that. You make up 5 characters, and that's regular play. That's not what you learn in your first few sessions as a player. They've been playing this way, Bill, for 20 fucking years, some of them. 20 and 30 years. They're 30 years later, experienced players with the DM are still making 5 characters, running at combat all the time, and playing it like a combat game. You are supposed to learn when you first start D&D that after your first campaign or two, you as a player should have experienced or understand that you learn this is a survival game, and that if you carelessly run at combat, you die all the time. So you don't do that. That's not good gameplay, because it's not good gameplay. The reason there's a meat grinder is because that's not the way you're meant to play it. It is meant to be a survival game. Well, you're not surviving if you're going through a meat grinder. So the game is not meant for you to be losing character after character. It is actually meant for you to be playing a character that survives. And once you're an experienced player, you should be able to do that easier. Like most characters you start after a certain point should be guys that survive. And after a couple of years of playing, you should know this as a player. Imagine YouTubers who've been running it for 20 or 30 years, where them and their group still have not learned that it's a survival game, where they talk about it in their streams and their YouTube videos like it's a combat game, where you purposely keep carelessly running at combat after 30 years. Same players, same DM. And they don't even know that designers did not intend the game to be that way. And I have to come in and correct them. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Bill, after years of doing content on here, these are big fucking guys too. Big followings for our little echo chamber here. They have way more followers than me. After I do my streams covering this stuff properly, out of nowhere, suddenly, without acknowledging my existence, just acting like I'm Baltimore, suddenly they have the wisdom to explain it's a survival game right after I explain it. Before my videos, before my streams, every one of their streams and videos are talking about a combat game where you lose characters all the time. Literally, within the week of my first bit of coverage explaining this, suddenly, guys who never seemed to have the wisdom a day before I did that, whose all their content before I do my coverage contradicts what I'm saying, suddenly, out of nowhere, they talk as if they've known that the entire time. But yet, you can go back the week before and listen to their content. It's clear as fucking day. They don't know this. They had to watch me to learn it. Of course, there's a lot of good DMs out there. Look, I don't speak in absolutes, Bill. And when I talk to old school guys, real old school guys, they get this, right? They do. And then you also got to understand, Bill, there's lots of guys out there that run mediocre games. Where I got to be real with you, Bill. Some players don't know nothing but the top of a molehill. And they actually think, because they don't know there's anything better out there. That's why I got to be real with some people. I warn. I seen guys, and this ain't take a hit at you, but I bet you are a good DM. I have no doubt. But I seen guys beg to play games that are mediocre. Like they're like, man, I want to play that game. But I realize, after looking at the games they've been in, because they don't know there's anything but the top of the molehill, they don't know there's anything better. They think that's great. And they're like, man, I play his game. I only go through 3 characters, not 5. So, and they want to play that because they think that's actually, they've developed that as regular gameplay. So there's some people that get into the game, and once they think it's something it's not, they can do that. I played AD&D 1E after my first campaign, short one, which was about 3 years. I knew right away survival. I played 2 other campaigns of AD&D 1E. Both characters survived without dying. 3 years of play. I never went through multiple characters. Easy as pie. We knew right away as players to avoid combat early. We did up to level 3. No problem. We start getting a bit more open about the combat we go at. Not much. We get more open as we hit level 6. And then we hit level 9, because this is what you learn about D&D, is by level 9, you can now be the hero. Level 1, you're not the hero. Level 6, you're not the hero. Level 8, you're not the hero. Level 9, you're more capable of being the hero the game intends you to be. And so what did I start telling my players when I started running in 1991? Early, even before I was done all my playing. I would tell my players, the game doesn't start until level 9. And they'd be like, what do you mean? Well, I said, think of levels 1 to 8 as the background of your character. Like, huh? I'm like, yeah, you're not heroes. The game, I would tell every player that would come into my game, the game does not start until level 9. They were like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're here to what? Play what you see as pitched, like the big character, the hero character, the whatever character. They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you won't be capable of doing that until level 9. So the game starts at level 9. We'll work our way up there, but the game really starts at level 9. And then late game play, Bill, 80 to 90% of AD&D 1E DMs never ran the game beyond level 8 to level 10. So look at the manual planes. The game is meant to be played at high levels. Actually, the game really doesn't start as a hero until level 9. The designers intend for you to actually play to level, up to the higher levels. Actually intend this. Most guys aren't even running. They don't run past level 8, most. Some run up to level 10. Very few run beyond that. Though the designers actually think you're going to keep playing. They actually intend it because they did that themselves. They played to these levels. So they give you the manual of planes so you can understand what you would do and how you would deal with higher level gaming. Now, I personally ran up to level 20 all the time. But I'm going by designer intent, right? Here's what a lot of guys were guilty of. They would start playing D&D and never read all the material. Now, that's just true. I get it. A lot of guys admit to that, though. They don't admit that that's why they don't know certain things after so many years. But I met guys that were started in like 79. I met one guy, 79. He starts playing my game. He's like, dude, we're doing really well, but I've never played the game like this. So like, it's like you start at 79. He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, I'm just doing what the designers intend for us to do. And I taught him. And he realized from 79 up till he encountered my game. Oh, we were going against what the designers intended. I said, yeah, that's why you were going through so many characters. And you want to see a guy have a eureka. Like an eye-opening moment. He's like, wow. Like he wowed out one night. He couldn't believe how good he was doing. He was floored. He said, he told me, I had guys that came in like that, but he's the first guy really experienced. This was in 93. And the guy confesses to me, I wish I knew this for the last decade. That he really had a lot of regret not knowing what I was teaching him. That he had spent over 10 years at that point playing the game in the completely opposite way than the designers intended, and realized how good the game was when you went with designer intent, and that the game was made for what they were intending it to be. And I'm not saying that I was running it better. That's not what I mean. And he thought all the guys before me were great. So the guys that were running it incorrectly for him, man, he thought their games were great. He got into mine. He was like, wow. It's not bragging, Bill. It's just one of those things. You don't got to be a genius. Just run the game correctly, and people have an experience that the designers intend for you to have. It's like Cyberpunk. I remember Cyberpunk. I'd watch guys run it in a generic way because they didn't understand spotlighting. They didn't understand the basic thing that the designer had intent for. Cyberpunk was Traveler. Like it was Traveler. You imagine you just try to put Traveler into a cyberpunk thing, but you're not doing anything to enforce the actual setting of the field. Well, the guy who made cyberpunk wanted you to feel cyberpunk. He wanted you to feel, and he knew what it took to actually for you to feel the setting. He knew how to get you out of the Traveler mindset of generic. And he explains in detail how often you need to be spotlighting getting players to play the characters, because the characters are designed that if you play them the way you're meant to, you'll experience and feel the world he's created. But it really needs you to focus on doing the characters the way they are for designer intent, right? So I ran Cyberpunk and realized 70 to 80% of the time, you need to put characters in situations where you can spotlight what they do. So you need to give them activities where the player, you need to assist the player. So don't just expect players. Like in Traveler, players play the characters the way they want. And in Cyberpunk, it's a bit different. 20% of the time, players can do what they want with their characters. But for the 80% of the time, the game master is meant to assist, and not just assist, but pressure players to play the characters as they are. Meaning, I need to keep putting characters in situations where the player needs to do what the character is meant to do. So if it's to get, like, say you're a hacker type, I need to give you hacking situations quite often, not every moment, and not every moment has to be every single character is all in spotlight. But a lot of moments have to be constant spotlight, and maybe even taking turns spotlight here. The next section would be spotlight this guy. And it's so you can feel what it is to be a hacker in this world. So you can actually feel that the world is this place you need to hack through. Like you need to do what the characters do because the world is this way. And when you do it properly, the players actually feel the cyberpunk world. Like they actually experience it. They actually get the feel. It's part of the atmosphere. If you don't do that, if you only half-ass and run it like a Traveler type of game where you let players mostly do what they want, it becomes a completely generic game and changes the feel. Completely gone. And here's what I would notice. When I ran players for Cyberpunk, players would tell me that was amazing. The same, I remember having players come from another guy who ran it. They're like, man, the way you ran Cyberpunk is fucking amazing. The way that guy ran Cyberpunk was boring. And it wasn't that I was better. Like, it's just like, oh, I'm more talented. I was doing it right by designer intent. The other guy didn't do the spotlighting. He put them in situations where they could try stuff, but he did it. He ran it like Traveler. Do what you want. But without the pressure, the players are just doing random things. There's no pressure for them to play the characters out and feel the setting. So it just becomes a very generic game. And what would you see? Complaints come from players all the time about Cyberpunk with the majority of guys running it. Because they run it like this. Majority of guys did not understand the game. I hate to say it. I'm not picking, but I'm just being real with you. 90% of guys I encountered that ran Cyberpunk did not understand Cyberpunk. Like the guys who ran it. It was like I watch, and I don't want to say you're playing the game wrong because I am, Bill, I'm not that anal. I really do believe you run and play the game the way you want at your table privately. I don't care. I'm not one of these guys that tell you that if you do something different than me, you're not running D&D. I'm just not one of these assholes. I don't care. And I'm completely fine if somebody comes and tells me they had a good time. I had a good time. Even if I think they just don't know better, because a lot of guys I did meet over the years, they'd be in generic games for over a decade, and then they get in a game that was a little higher up the mountain or on the mountain for once instead of a molehill. And they'd be like, man, I didn't even know the game could be this good. Like imagine playing for 20 years and you think you hit peak. You actually think what you're doing is amazing because you have nothing to compare it to. You actually think this is it. This is the top. And you actually get happy with what you think it is. And then you enter a game where you meet a guy who could suddenly run it up here and you didn't even know up here existed. You're like, shit, I didn't even know it could be better than this. But you don't, I met a lot of guys that just didn't know that. They'd be secluded with, say, like an at-home group. They come out to the public finally because they move from one place to another, move from like another place they were playing in their guys group, and they played that guy's game with their same players for like 20 years. And he moves down to where I'm at, and he's like, man, I don't got a DM down here of friends. Can I join your game? Yeah, yeah. And then he'd get into the game, and he'd be like, shit, dude. I didn't even know it could be this. Because he thought they reached peak. He thought peak, like what the guy was doing was awesome. And I'm not trying to say what the guy was doing was completely bad, but this might just, I'm being real with you, Bill. I'm being honest with you. I'm not trying to be egotistic here. I just met a few guys, more than a few guys, to be honest, that just said, man, I didn't think there was a higher level. And once they experience that the game could be further up than they were at, that's when the ignorance pours out of them. But that's what happened to me. That's what cursed me as a player. In 1987, going into when I sort of retired from playing around 99, when I officially said I really don't want to be a player no more full time, I had been cursed because when I entered the hobby, my DM was at the top peak of the mountain. And he cursed me because he was so good that everybody after that just sort of sucked, right? They don't. I'm not trying to brag, but you don't have to be a genius. It's not an ego thing, Bill. I hope you really realize that. It's not me trying to say I'm better. Just imagine the difference between doing something right and doing something where you're guessing your way through. There's a reason the designer made the game this way to be played this way, because there is an experience that is fabulous, like the cyberpunk thing. There is a great experience with it. But if you don't do the certain details, some games can be on that edge like this. If you don't do certain things, the entire field collapses. But if you do these small things over here, it's like the atmosphere thing. Bill, I know you can appreciate this. Imagine how small the seed is that I have to plant in your mind to get you to feel an atmosphere. It's like the raining thing I said. You walk out, I say it's raining, but I also say a little bit of, raindrops are hitting your face, run down. You can feel that little bit of stickiness. You can smell that fucking wet smell off the ground. I don't have to give you a lot, Bill. But when I put those seeds in your mind, you think about that stuff, right? As I'm saying it, you think about it and you can relate with the details I'm giving you. That lets you mentally start feeling the atmosphere. And I didn't have to do much. Now, imagine when I walk you out into that and I don't do that stuff. What seems really small, what I'm doing, becomes this big, right? It's like a big issue. You do not feel the rain no more. The atmosphere is completely dried out on you by me not doing that. So some tabletop role-playing games can live on that edge of a little bit over is greatness and a little bit over is absolute bottom of the barrel. And you have to learn that. See, it's small seeds, but you have to learn it. Like, this is trash. This is really bad. Like, just a little lean is awful. It's actually an awful experience. A little tiny lean this way is a fucking mind-blowing, amazing experience. And it's once you understand there's an edge that just a little tip over is top of the mountain. A little tip over is top of the molehill this way. Right? And a lot of guys, it takes years to pick up that wisdom and learn these things. But I just decided to do something really crazy. Learn games, pay attention, boom. But my thing was I came in with a DM who just knew the stuff really well. And I got lucky. In 87, a lot of the old guys were in a military community of gamers. These were war gamers, too, that crossed over. Just a lot of wise, intelligent, really like hobbyists, deep hobbyist guys. Elitist, if you want to call them that. When they meet me as a young guy, they realize I'm deeply passionate about the game. I have the mind for thinking like they do. And they decided to treat me like their kid. Like my DM had sons. When he passed away, they called me over to give me his gaming books. I said, you guys game too. Why don't you just keep the books? They're like, Steven, no, you're his son when it comes to gaming. They told me this. I love them. I told them, I said, You're his kids. He talked about you guys all the time. He loved you. He's like, no, they knew this. They knew their father loved them. There was no doubt about it. But they said, like, this is your mentor, dude. Like, we know you have look, they gave me his books, realizing even though they DM and game and all this, they gave me his stuff because they said, we were his sons at home. You were his son in the gaming world. And that's the type of relationship I deeply have with this guy. When he passed away, they left me the books. I had all kinds of guys that were like uncles to me. I have all kinds of uncles. I come from a family of, my mother had like 7 brothers. I always had men around me teaching me stuff. When I came in 87 to 89, going especially into 1990, I had guys just teaching me the games all the time. The real wisdom they picked up from 74 when D&D came out, right up until that time, deep conversations. And they were guys that just poured wisdom into me. And they had a high standard too. Like, I couldn't get away with half reading a book and talking to them. I have to read it. My first time playing a game, when I went to enter, I had a book thrown at me. I mean, I've told the story a million times, but it's just true. I had a book thrown at me the first time I tried to enter any game at all. It was thrown at me, almost thrown at my head. I say it jokingly, but I mean, sort of true. And they told me to read the book and come back in a week. And I went and I read it 3 times, front to back. When I came back, because these are all real hobbyists that know the book really well and have all read it, they knew. And they let me play. And then they realized, even though I was really young, because a lot of guys enter the hobby as kids, not just me. Like, that's common to start when you're like 7 and 8 years old. But I had a deep mind for this stuff. And I got lucky enough to get them guys that understood what the designers wanted. And they stuck those principles in my head. And my first DM was so good, he could just improvise like breathing air. And he was in the military. He was a manipulation specialist. Worked on shit. I'll leave it alone. Regime change, but he did what DMs do. And the guy took me to the peak and taught me everything about DMing you could ever imagine. And he cursed me because after I'd been ran by him, I could not find another game master that was as good as he was, ever. I live beside cops in the fire department, so so that's why you hear the alarms go off every so often. But I was in with him, and he cursed me because after that I could not find a guy who was as good. I tried. Even before that, even before organized play, my friend John ran us through freestyling. John was another guy who knew game mastering really well. You ever hear Gary Gygax say or read the statement where he says, I hope people don't learn that they don't need our game rules to be able to do this. John is the purest form of that I've ever met in my life. Before I ever did organized play, he said, Steven, you're thinking about asking to join a game. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I run something for you. I was like, well, what game? He's like, no. We'll just use 6-sided dice. I'll make it up as we go. He said, just write down some things you want for a character, like a name or stuff. Okay. The guy ran the first session I ever played. We played 16 hours on a weekend. I was young. He was older than me. He was an older teenager. But we played for 16 straight hours. He had nothing. No board in front of him. No notes. No nothing written down. He had 6-sided dice. Made up some freehand rules on the spot. The guy had me deep into the game for 16 hours. Was able to react to everything every player at the table was doing. Like breathing air. John, outside of my initial first DM, is the most talented guy I've ever met in the hobby. One of the most intelligent, fucking talented people I probably met in life, let alone in the hobby. The guy was a fucking genius. Right? And to hit a guy that much talent was amazing. And so he ran a good 12 sessions for us in this way. And a lot of my Skullhorn world that I developed through sandboxing was stuff that he let me take from what he was doing. I call this thing called Storm Wars campaign that I ran. I ran an early version of it in real life, and then I ran a version of it online when I started in early 2000s. Storm is an NPC that originally he developed in that freestyle game with me for 12 sessions. And when I made my Skullhorn thing, I asked him, I said, could I use Storm? He's like, yeah. Because even though he did that gaming, amazing as he was, he didn't game that much. He ran us for 12 sessions, and he'd every so often show up to play. It's like, John, why do you play more? He's like, I don't always have time. He was a military guy. He was in that stuff. He was always making money doing crazy stuff secretly. So, but when the guy would show up to play, man, it was like he was there forever. Like the guy had the mind, amazing mind as a player, as a game master. My first DM was amazing, and they set high standards on me. So you can understand why when I walked out of that group, most guys I meet after that, you'll hear me, like I had to calm down because I did have a bit of an ego when I left that, which was walking around the different communities outside of that group going, like I remember my first day going out to a public gaming group going, you guys, like I start cursing at them. Like I was like, you fucking lazy fucks. And I had a guy had to drag me off to the side and just say, Steven, you got to calm down. You can't do this here. Let me teach you. He's a military guy that understood my group and the level I was playing at. He's like, you're now meeting the majority, Steven. He goes, if you can't handle this, you're not going to last in this hobby. Like you're going to make people hate you. You're going to call it because everyone's going to be lazy to you, dude. And he warned me, almost nobody reads, just like you're saying here. Most don't do background learning. Most are half-assing their way through everything. And he says, you're going to notice this. It's going to stick out to you, and you got to make peace with it. Like he warned me straight up because he knew what kind of gaming I had been doing. High-level gaming with some very intelligent people. And he's like, you're now meeting the majority, Steven. I know you weren't warned about this, but let me have a talk with you now. You're going to make everybody in this place hate your fucking guts. Because we were at this big bingo type of whole thing where they'd have bingo every second weekend, but we'd have a sort of what you call a gaming con every weekend with the open public. And down here where I'm at, we even had this thing called HowCon that has like 50,000 people go to it, 40 and 50,000 people. So the con here is huge. Gaming here is fucking huge. It's always been a huge gimmick. It's been like this for decades here. And we had gaming communities everywhere. And so when I came up to this one, he starts getting me to calm down. Even as a YouTuber, I've had to adjust myself. I remember the first year I started coming on YouTube, I talk about things, but I realize a lot of guys coming to watch my content, I'm talking over their head. Like I'm talking about stuff that I'm like, you always want to be better so you become better. And your experience is so good, Bill. That's the issue too. It's so good that, and your standards go this high. But here's a problem, Bill. Because most people aren't here, you start judging really badly. That's a big issue. It's sort of a poison pill. Like you're here, but you'll realize when you get here, so few people in the hobby are actually here. Like this many are here. This many. And when you talk the way you do, people are like, oh, you think you're better than us. Nope. No, I don't. I think I'm trying harder at this stuff than you are. I think I'm reading more than you are. But I don't think I'm just automatically more special than you are or more intelligent. I just think I'm reading the whole thing. I'm trying my best to understand. I'm not being lazy. And because of these principles and activities I'm doing, it means I'm gaming up here, but what I'm realizing is so few people are up here. Most are down here. And I had to calm the fuck down. I get frustrated having conversations on here because I'll talk in a certain way. And a lot of the audience, they're thinking here when I'm talking up here. And I try to be exact because I really just mean what I say up here. And even if they feel I mean something else, I really don't mean that thing. But it can make dialogue hard with some of the audience I do talk to that's, say, part of the echo chamber group. Because they have a weird way of taking things in. Like, like, it's like, you've heard me say about the sandboxing stuff. I think if you want to call DM a player, I think sandboxing is more closer to that reality. But you've heard me in detail. I don't say you're not DMing if you run a module. I don't say you're not DMing if you're running the game in a different way. I never said that. I don't even really imply it. If you actually listen to my exact words, I'm actually saying, I think you're DMing, but it's work. Remember I told you? If you're DMing a module, that's work. But I'll call it DMing. But imagine if you're one of these guys listening to me and I say what I said about sandboxing, and you feel, even though I'm not saying these words, you feel like I'm saying you're not really DMing unless you're sandboxing. Now, I'm really not saying that, and I really don't mean that. And I'm actually trying to be very accurate with what I say to avoid that. But guys will feel this is what I'm saying. Here's what will cripple the dialogue, like a recent comment I had. A guy will come to me, and his response to me will be, well, you're pretty much telling me that I say guys aren't really DMing unless they're doing the sandbox. But I never said that. But I know he feels that, like, that's how he feels when he hears me speaking, but I'm not saying it. Now, he's going to speak about his feeling as if I actually said these words. But I never said that. And now I have to, for me to have a talk with him, I have to correct that. But then you get guys out here with agendas like we talked about. So some guys are purposely wanting to confuse the language for an agenda. So even if I explain it, I then have to understand that a lot of guys I'm going to talk to are not honest players. They're not honest actors in the conversation. So even if I start being reasonable with them, and I've tried this with guys that I know have an agenda, instead of them being understanding, because for them to be understanding, that means what they're pushing could potentially be incorrect, or it's going to be weakened by not being able to use this in their argument. Because they want to use their feeling into this assumption into the argument they're making. And they know if they accept that I'm not really saying that, it weakens their argument, and they don't want that. So you get into this weird game. I get into this weird game with a lot of people I'm talking to in the old school because so many, it's a very odd place, but so many have agendas, and so many are being two-faced when you talk to them. And so many of them are really bad actors in the conversation. Right? That it makes having a reasonable, honest conversation with them just about impossible. Because first off, they're not trying to be reasonable from the get-go. They're not trying to be logical. They're purposely trying to push something, and they don't want to hear anything that says they might be wrong. Or that their opinion, it doesn't mean it has to be wrong, but it might not be something they can enforce as absolute truth. That really what they're pushing stays on a maybe level. Sure, that's your opinion. But a lot of guys aren't happy with that. It's like the bro guys, the bro OSR. They talk in absolutes. This is the way it is. So when I obviously point out to them the flaws in what they're saying, now they can't, with power behind it, say that this is the way it is. If they accept that there's merit in my words, that I have a good point to be made here, they know that doesn't empower what they're saying to be an absolute statement. Now they have to say, well, here's my opinion. They can no longer say this is the way it is. They have to say this is my opinion that this is the way it is. And they don't want that. They want to be able to say this is the way it is. So it's like they have an agenda with what they push. So Like they call it wargaming for D&D. I know it's not wargaming, right? And if you listen to me detail it out, you'll know it's not wargaming. But for them to give credence to what I say would be then to weaken their overall agenda. So they don't want to be reasonable. They're not honest they're not honest players in the conversation. So it doesn't matter if I say something reasonable to them. They're looking, and the more reasonable you are with people like this, Bill, here's what's cursing. When you're trying to be nice and reasonable, they'll use you. Like if they can take your really good point and destroy it publicly, right? Even though you're right, you could be correct, but if you say it in a weak way, and they can make it seem like you're wrong, just publicly, they will, and they won't care about the truth because they don't care about the truth, and they're looking to convince people that they're absolutely right, and they don't care about the truth to begin with. So your reasonableness becomes your weakness. They'll use it against you, and they really will. And you got to remember, there's a lot of people in the old school, a shitload of people that are like that. It's actually, sadly, the majority of people you're going to interact with. Like the guys that are speaking up. Very few are honest. Almost every old school guy I know, not just D&D people, they're fucking very dishonest people here. And I mean the vast majority. Deeply fucking dishonest people. And they'll take your reasonableness and your kindness and your fairness, and they'll destroy your truth, the truth. And they'll use you to destroy the truth. You'll speak the truth, and even worse, if you say it in a weak way, they'll destroy the truth and more powerfully push a lie or something that is not absolute. And they'll do it, and you'll help them do it. You won't even realize it. You'll think you're being kind and fair. They will use you to destroy the truth that you believe is, like the stuff that you believe, that you know is true. You become the greatest weapon against the thing that you're stating out loud. And they'll use you as a weapon against the thing that you believe. And a lot of times, guys that are being fair won't even know they're being used in that way. You'll do more damage to the truth you want people to know when you're trying to say it. You'll do more damage to your own ideas by being like that with certain people. And they know you will. They know you'll be the greatest weapon against what you know to be true. And they'll use you as a weapon against your own ideas. And you got to know there's shitloads of people in the old school that are like that. We are in a war of ideas, Bill, here. Not you, the audience, but I'm a YouTuber. I'm in the war of ideas with other public people. And some of the audience takes part in it, right? And we are in a war of ideas here in the old school. And you don't have to take it seriously and tell people. I do. I personally do. I tell people like this that are in the audience, you don't have to go sit down, but please don't push it on me. I'm in the fucking war of ideas here. I volunteer for this. I have a passion for this, and I want to do this. And I think it's good because I'm in the war of ideas on the side of truth, not agendas. And so the truth really doesn't have too many warriors in the old school. In the old school, we have a big problem. Lies and agendas have armies. The truth has almost nobody. So I'm like, I'll be the raindrop that becomes a warrior for the truth against lies, deceit, and deceitful agendas. Because they come here with fucking armies, right? And they succeed. Think about it. Look, from 74 until the early 90s, 80% of DMs do theater of the mind. Most old school people in the audience today, especially innocent people, that they're not bad people. They actually don't know that we did theater of the mind combat 80% en masse from 74 up until the 90s. They don't even know this. That's how well the lies and bullshit are spread. Why don't most people know what I'm saying? Because lies and agendas have been pushed powerfully without pushback. And what you find out is it doesn't take much But somebody has to push back for the truth to actually get into the minds of people. If not, we have people that have rewritten history, Bill, and the truth about what D&D was in the history we have gets erased. Gets erased. And it only takes a few people to speak up for it, but people have to speak up for it. If not, the liars win. Right? And if you're okay with people never knowing the truth, and I'm like, boom. But it is everything. It's not just politics. That's just life with ideas. Like, this is like it's anywhere for anything. Politics is just, it's not even politics. You're just talking about the battle of ideas. The battle of ideas happens in politics. So the method of fighting for ideas and truth is the same everywhere. It's not politics. Politics is borrowing from it. Not it is politics. Yeah, that's where you're misunderstanding. Politics is just another place of ideas. So we have a way of fighting over ideas, the open square of ideas, the debate square, the open square of arguing ideas. That's not politics, Bill. That's just the open square of ideas, right? Politics borrows from that battle to fight over its ideas. The same way people in the video game hobby borrow from that method, the open square of ideas, to fight their ideas. It's not politics. You'd be misunderstanding what you're doing. It's not politics at all. But it is the method of fighting over ideas. Like, say you're in a community and two different communities disagree, or people in the community disagree. They debate, they argue. That in itself is not really politics. That's just a method of ideas clashing, right? So you just have to care about the hobby you're in or the thing you're in. And if you don't, here's what happens, Bill. Liars automatically take over in almost everything. That's what you find out. So if nobody speaks the truth in the hobby, it's like, look at the woke stuff. Not forget even politics, just ideology. Look at the woke stuff in the WotC world. Barely anybody spoke up. That takes over. And only a few people actually support it. It's only a small number of people in the WotC world that support that, but it's completely taken over because nobody pushed back. That's how easy it is to lose your entire history. It doesn't take much, but a guy like me, especially when we've had so few people speak up for so many years, it's so well established. For the truth to get out, I have to come in against these armies and take heat. And most guys that agree with me won't take the heat. They'll have all kinds of excuses of why they avoid it. But I'm like, I choose to care about this. I don't have to, but that's like, to me, caring about this is living life. It's something I care about. So of course I'll come argue for it. I care about the history. I'll come argue. And if I don't, the history gets erased. The people that lie win. The future of the hobby belongs to them completely. Just because we're good, decent people, Bill, if we're soft, our ideas vanish. Our history is rewritten. Everything we know goes away. So we decide. Either we take part in the battle or we lose. And kindness and realness will be stomped on. Now they say nice guys finish last. This is an example of exactly that. You come into a world of ideas where people want to own what you're doing. The liars will win. And the nice guy will be kicked to the curb. You're nice and reasonable. Wrong group. They're not playing by the rules. They're not playing fair. So you got to be brutal with them. You got to come in and push back verbally hard. You got to give a shit. You got to say stuff. And you got to take this serious if you want to. But it's like, if you told me, well, why bother caring? I'd be like, well, why bother caring about anything in life, Bill? You pick your wars. You pick what you care about. I care about this. Everything else, politics, means nothing. Who cares? This over here, who cares? Everybody can just choose not to live and live under a fucking rock. You can just sit there and live no life. Never fight for anything. Never give a shit. Just live in fucking seclusion as if you don't give a fuck about anything. To me, It's like, that's just not living, dude. It's I don't care what everything. So I agree with you. I don't go fight over everything. But it's like even in the video game world, I'm not into video games that way. I don't care. But I'll look over the guys in video games and go, I totally relate with the guys that care about it. I don't ever tell guys that care about video games that are out there arguing. Man, why care? Like, just say the nice thing and let liars walk on you and take over the complete video game hobby, and they'll rewrite history and destroy everything you love. Like, just let them do it. Just be nice. Just say it in a nice way. Even though I know the liars over there will fucking walk on that guy for speaking nice, and they'll destroy his fucking any effect he would have on that part of the thing. So I know personally that a guy in the video game world who gives a shit about video games or in anything in life, he needs to be rough in return when it's dealing with guys that are full of shit. And even though I'm not in the video games, I will not sit there and tell him to calm down. I won't tell him to be nice, because if I'm being real with him, I'll be like, you care about video games, right? Yeah, well, you better fucking speak up, dude. If not, everything you know about video games will be gone. Those guys over there will own the future of your hobby. Everything you love about video games will be erased. So the old school doesn't win when we let liars go on. And a lot of us will care at certain times where it's like, you care right now, right? And I hate this. I hate seeing old school guys that care after we lose. Like, when you should have fought back, nobody spoke up. Everybody was like, oh, why make a big issue? And then when everything's gone, they're like, I can't believe it's gone. This is fucked up. I'm like, did you speak up when you should have? No. Then shut your fucking mouth. Either speak up when it counts. Don't bother bitching when it's gone. Because if you want something to be something, you better speak up when it matters. And you better speak up when it has an effect to speak up. And guess what? Most people won't bother speaking up until it's okay to complain, or the thing is completely gone, because then they want it back. I don't know how many nice guys will lose something and they're like, but I was nice. I can't believe we lost it. Well, dude, remember how I said you have liars and deceitful people crushing you and walking on you? Yeah. Well, you know how you were nice and kind, but you expected that to win? Yeah. It didn't. They crushed you. And now what you love is gone. It's gone. It's gone for good. You don't get to get it back tomorrow, dude. It took years to establish that fucking thing. It's gone. And whining about it after it's gone means nothing. Did you do anything when they were tearing it down in the process? I was being reasonable. No. These guys weren't playing fair. Being reasonable, they'll walk on that. That means nothing. You lose. Did you get aggressive and push back? No. Well, dude, there goes your shit. After guys lose stuff, I've told guys in the past, because I had to learn this when I was young, I get frustrated with people. They'd lose something after doing nothing about it, really. I'd be like, dude, don't bitch to me. But man, it's good. No, shut the fuck up. You should have spoke up when you should have spoke up. I don't want to hear what you got to fucking say after it's gone. You can kiss my fucking ass. I think you're fucking weak and pathetic. Right? And I don't mind guys that let it go and don't say anything. Fair enough. You didn't argue for it. It's gone. You accept the outcome. There's a weird respect I have for people like that. You didn't speak up. The thing you loved is gone. But you understand it's gone because you didn't speak up. Fair enough. You're not bitching and complaining. Fair enough. Okay. Fair. At least you understand the reality of the outcome. You didn't speak up when it mattered, and now you've lost what you loved. It's gone. It didn't have to be this way. You could have spoke up and kept it. But since you didn't, it's gone. At least you acknowledge it's your fucking fault it's gone. Fair enough. Okay. Right? But I do get fucking tired in life on every fucking subject I encounter, where I see guys that should have spoke up sooner about something in life, It's gone because they didn't, or they were reasonable with guys that were walking on them. And the thing is gone, and they're crying about it. And I'm just like, ugh. All right, Bill, I love you. Have a good night there, dude. I think that's enough ranting for me. I'll probably turn that into some kind of video later. I love everyone who's put up with me for the night. I appreciate it. I love you all. We'll be in a more positive setting tomorrow night. I'll be in a much better mood because things are happening tomorrow, and I'll be in a fucking good mood by the time I get here. Sorry, tonight was a bit of ranting. Sometimes I get this system thing going. I got to get things off my chest. Okay. I love y'all. Take care.